And thank you, everybody, for coming to this emergency alert workshop today. It's very exciting to see such a crowd, and for all of the folks who are watching it streaming on the internet. I would like to open this event. Is an important event that we hope will really help us learn how to increase the value of EAS for emergency management offices, the folks who are on the ground, the most immediately aware of dangers to the lives of the folks in their community. And we are very, very grateful to be able to begin this event by having opening remarks from Commissioner Minion Clyburn. Commissioner Clyburn, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You're not happy to see me? Okay, that's okay. Thank you, Mr. Cook, for that gracious introduction and for allowing me to welcome our guests here today. I think they're a little bit more lively right now to today's workshop. Admiral Simpson, as always, it's great to see you. The Emergency Alert System, or EAS, is a critical means of delivering life and property-saving information to our citizens. In November of 2011, we held the first ever nationwide EAS test to assess how the broadcast-based national architecture would perform, develop, and implement any necessary improvements to ensure that if activated in a real emergency, our nation would be ready. We learned quite a few things after conducting that test. First, it was clear that we needed to make some technical changes to the codes being used. Second, the visual message that was transmitted during the first nationwide EAS test, was not really accessible. People reported that the message in some of the video crawls scrolled across the screen too quickly. They also reported that the typeface used was difficult to read. Third, we learned that we should increase the flexibility of the EAS to expand its use by emergency managers both at the state and local levels. So in June of this year, we released an order to address these concerns and adopted new operational standards. Now, this is something the Commission normally does when it is faced with making some critical changes, but we took things a step further. We directed our staff to hold a workshop on these issues and instructed them to do so within 3 months of the release of that order. This is partly why you are here. We also broke the norm here because, like you, we know how important it is to protect all Americans, especially those with unique needs. So attendees and viewers this afternoon will see fascinating demonstrations of how wireless emergency alerts can be leveraged by public safety answering points, not to send help just to one person, but to enable two-way information between local agencies and people in trouble. The goal here this afternoon is to demonstrate how communities can leverage technical advances in wireless alerts to empower themselves. And with regard to making EAS messages more accessible for people living with disabilities, our June order also directed more examination of text-to-speech or TTS technology, including ongoing research, development, and readiness for reliable, cost-effective implementation as part of the EAS. We recognize that TTS technology is maturing and that there is a need to explore the technical feasibility of improving the synchronicity of EAS audio with the EAS visual crawl, as well as the readiness of TTS technology. I understand that Oregon, Minnesota, Texas, Maine, Kentucky, and many counties in Kansas California, Utah, Kentucky, Oregon, and Wyoming have made these improvements to their systems, and that EAS systems also currently support text-to-speech in the following languages: English, Spanish, French, German, Italian, Hmong, and Somali, allowing more populations better access to emergency alerts. I applaud, like you, these developments. So once again, I would like to thank all of you for allowing me to join you for a few moments this afternoon, and I look forward to reading the reports about what we have learned from each of you. Godspeed.
Well, that was great. That was absolutely terrific. Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. And now to offer some opening remarks to our workshop is our Bureau Chief, Rear Admiral David Simpson.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. And this could not be more appropriate today, this week, as we acknowledge that it's been 10 years since Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and our nation went through one of the most horrific of natural disasters that a community can imagine. And we did not have all of the communication tools at the ready that we would have liked in hindsight to have had available to mitigate the suffering associated with that event. So today we're going to talk about what could be the art of the possible. First, the art of the possible with tools that are in place today that if we just have the imagination to begin to utilize those tools in ways that can dramatically improve the way that communities get the word out, would make a difference in saving lives and reducing suffering. But second, if we apply that imagination to the art of what could be with a couple of relatively easy to do, taking a note from what is in place in social media today, in other kinds of communication avenues, bringing that into the alerting space has great promise to, in the near term, even further contribute to the community utilization of this wonderful resource of alerting. Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn, for your welcoming remarks and for her unwavering support of public safety communications. As I was reviewing the agenda for today's workshop, I couldn't help but be struck by the deep and common bond that links today's participants. Whether you're a broadcaster committed to an effective emergency alert system, an emergency manager committed to an up-to-date and responsive 911 system, and more importantly, the 911 service that provides, or an advocate for people with disabilities committed to ensuring that emergency communications are accessible to all the public, your commitments share a common theme: saving the lives of citizens in danger, reducing suffering, and keeping our communities safe. The Commission shares that commitment. That's why we've brought together this particular group here today in the workshop, so we can all learn from each other, work together, inspire each other, and begin to leverage our individual knowledge and resources to develop a stronger, more effective emergency alert system. The underlying purpose of the workshop is to explore ways to improve the value of the EAS and related systems, such as wireless emergency alerts, as life-saving resources for community emergency managers, and to ensure that these alerting systems are accessible to all. As the case studies that we are about to see will illustrate, we'll accomplish this goal largely by taking advantage of resources that are already in place, that are already paid for, by empowering state emergency management offices, and particularly 911 public safety answering points, with the authority and the resources to initiate alerts, with the know-how of how to get the certification to be alert initiators, we can increase the life-saving value of these platforms. That empowerment of PSAPs and first responders, those with the most immediate knowledge of life-threatening dangers, with the means to reach out to the public with the most up-to-date and accurate information of that danger, we will then effectively motivate community use of the EAS and the other alerting tools. The availability of the common digital platforms or convergence provided by the ongoing IP transition has the great potential to further increase the value of our alerting and 911 tools by conferring a single benefit to the emergency matter, an unprecedented capability to deliver alerts over multiple media streams, and to integrate that into the one-to-many nature of alerting. But then to also not just rest with the one-to-many, but to use the technology that's out there today to build an efficient and effective many back to one path, so that effective communication with the broadest base of impacted citizens can best help the emergency operating center, the public safety answering point, wherever that inject capability is, to rapidly gain an appreciation for the impact of that disaster on a community. Think of triage and what hospitals do there. This gives our public safety communicators a tool to rapidly triage the impact and the needs in a community. We know what alerting can do for us in the one-to-many piece. So I ask you today to think about how that many back to one will work. Think about social media. I was just talking with David Horowitz, one of the staffers on the Hill for Senator Pallone today, and he was recounting some of the Hurricane Sandy issues where a very enterprising young man set up a capability on Facebook. And for that community, his management of that Facebook account became the need and resource pairing mechanism for the community to ensure that what they had available to mitigate suffering could best be paired with where the greatest need was. And that's great. But that enterprising person with Facebook may not always emerge. And the goal here would be to normalize that kind of best value of social networking, social media, so that we can now expect that to be the norm, that we would be able to get that rapid triage assessment and then go through a needs pairing with that many back to one. As we'll see from the panel discussions, IP-based systems provide vastly more powerful platform for accessible multilingual alerts, including American Sign Language, as well as alerts that provide the deaf and blind with full access to life-saving information through the use of text-to-speech. By moving our alerting and 911 systems out of their old silos and integrating them into a unified public safety framework will allow emergency managers to have that conversation with the community, a conversation, an immediate conversation when the danger is appreciated, that provides the emergency manager with the situational awareness that significantly increases the value of alerting. Another example, by facilitating the interaction between alerting and 911, emergency manager would have the tools not only to alert the public, but also to assess the effectiveness of an alert in close to real time. How valuable would that be in a rapidly evolving emergency, such as a toxic spill, tornado, or child abduction, to be able to put a voting question into the alert that says, do you see the smoke in your area? Click here for yes, click there for no. If you've seen this child in the picture you just got through the alert, click here for further instructions. That kind of ability to get that two-way but efficient two-way dialogue, so we're not tying up the duplex communications of a community, is really a game changer in the immediacy of the response. The child abduction case offers another powerful example. By enabling the 911 operator to initiate an Amber Alert, you empower the first responder, that is the person in the best position to initiate the alert, saving the precious seconds that count for so much in any child abduction. We also need to bake a level of accessibility into these systems that ensures that all the public receives equal access to the alerts, and they all have equal opportunity to respond with all of our senses. Think of this also, if you will, as an adjunct to Next Generation 911. And similarly, as we build and realize Next Generation 911, as that being an adjunct to this alerting capability. The two really can be greater than the sum of the parts. Today's workshop will explore two key issues: how to improve the usefulness of the EAS for emergency managers at the state and local levels, and how to improve the accessibility of alerts to people with disabilities. We'll begin with 3 case studies that illustrate how emergency alerting in combination with 911 can be integrated in an iterative emergency communications dynamic that provides the alert initiator with a powerful life-saving tool. The case studies will be followed by 2 panel discussions that use the use cases as platforms to discuss alerting effectiveness, accessibility, respectively, and I'd add that imagination thing. Get us all going on the art of the could be. I want to thank all of the participants who've contributed their time and talents to this workshop. I'd also like to thank my staff and do a particular shout out to Greg Cook, who is our unwavering alert advocate, who is so much of a reason why we're meeting here today. So thank you all, and thank you, Greg.
Dave, that was very kind of you. Thank you. We're going to begin in about 2 minutes. I should have done the housekeeping first, but I'll do it now because it needs to be done. In case of an emergency, please exit the commission meeting room through the back doors, proceed to the lobby, and wait for further instructions from security. Bathrooms are located in the second corridor as you leave, so the next hall from here, turn left, and they'll be on your left-hand side, and any of us or any of the FCC employees in the back of the room will be there to direct you should you need it. If you need to connect to our Wi-Fi, the code is available in the brochures located in the back of this commission meeting room. For those who are watching this over the internet, you already realize that this workshop is being streamed live with open captioning and can be accessed at www.fcc.gov/live. And those watching the live stream, please be aware that you may submit your questions to live questions, that's one word, LIVEQUESTIONS at fcc.gov. And we look forward to receiving your questions. And audience members in the room may also submit their questions to live questions at fcc.gov or submit their questions via the index cards that were provided by an FCC staffer at the back of your room. Please, at any time, raise your hand at any point throughout the workshop, and we will collect your cards for you or give you a card. And for those of you on social media, you may follow us on Twitter using a hashtag FCC Live. Can we cue the first slide, please? So, welcome to the workshop. I think Dave has just given you our case studies, and to introduce and discuss the first case study, please welcome Elizabeth Dexter and Jennifer Myers of the Arlington Office of Public Safety Communications. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys for inviting us here. We're excited about being here and representing for PSAPs in the area especially, and how proud we are of the work we do. And we're going to present the first scenario to you guys right now. The first scenario is a train accident scenario. 2 trains have collided near a major city in the Pacific Northwest United States. The first, a passenger train, has derailed, and black, acrid smoke is filling a number of the cars. The area of freight train is leaking an unknown liquid from a tank car. And also, a special note on this is the presentation is not intended to depict an actual live event. The use of this case scenario is for administrative purposes only. Can you move just a little? Thank you. All right, the incident here that we're presenting starts at 5:36 p.m. An accident occurs as a passenger train and a freight train collide on the rails that dissect a major U.S. city. There's multiple injuries, a fluid leak, which obviously can be a potential hazmat incident. Scores of passengers stream out into the busy streets. First person to call 911, what he's stating is, "I think my train has crashed or derailed." Posts start popping up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, other types of accounts. "I think my train has been bombed. I heard an explosion." One person tries to text info to 911, and the response, of course, at this point they are getting is, "For emergency only, call 911. Text to 911 not available at this time." At that point, the person then texts her sister in Eugene, "I think something just happened. We're stuck on the train." Many people obviously are calling 911 at this point. The PSAP staff is locked onto one-to-one contact, begins the information flow primarily one way. There's incoming from the 911 callers and outgoing to the public safety personnel responding. Here comes the many-to-one communications between citizens, PSAPs, and first responders. Each holds just one piece of this information puzzle that we start to gather. One-to-many and many-to-one ensures all stakeholders have all the pieces to the puzzle, thereby getting the complete information picture. Local and regional government emergency managers are engaged. EAS notices build citizen awareness of emergencies. EAS and WIA notices provide localized emergency information to citizens, such as stay away from the area around the 14th Street station. Targeted WIA alerts hone in on train passengers and deliver targeted safety messages directly to the passengers' mobile devices, such as a WIA alert: "For all passengers on Seattle-bound train number 452, please do not leave the train for your safety. Please move to the back three cars of the train. Help is on the way." PSAPs monitor social media for instant granular ground-level information and post updates as necessary. Coordination with State Emergency Manager empowers PSAPs to be both conduits and depositories of vital information for the public.
As the alerts do continue throughout, you can actually have alerts being posted on signboards across the country stating there's a train accident, avoid the station. This will actually help 911 call centers be less inundated as the messages come across, alerting people in the beginning. Again, 911 callers get more timely interactive information via the PSAPs. Don't leave the train exposure on your skin. This way they're getting more information, and it's a one-to-one ratio, and they will actually become more invested in the process. Next slide. In the future, what would be like to be seen is WIA alerts that are actually interactive. They say, "We turn the fans on. Do you see smoke? Yes or no?" That way you can go through the process and see what you're doing is actually making a difference. This result will come in a more cyclical action, and it'll actually show that the more rich information environment to the public through the access of WIA alerts, iPOS, the emergency alert system, Facebook, and Twitter. As all of these important pieces of the puzzle do come together, it'll be a benefit for everybody involved in the actual situation that's going on and enhance life safety. The principles that are involved for improved PSAP performance are empowering the PSAPs to be the ones that are able to make these decisions to make WIA alerts going out to the public. Also, by getting different streams of information coming back and forth to ensure accessibility, and also leveraging new technology such as Facebook and the social media that's out there for more access to real-time instant information. Currently, the Arlington County Emergency Communications Center this is where Jen and I actually do work. Next slide. We are actually operational since October 6th of 2013. We are staffed by a 4-person team from 7 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock in the morning, 365 days of the year. Our major responsibility for Arlington County is to actually be involved in situational awareness for the county. We act as the conduit of continuous flow of information to the public and the field units, vice versa. We take the information, we analyze it, and we determine what to do, and we actually push it out to the community and also our internal stakeholders. Next slide. To achieve this goal, we actually go and we use integrated public alert and warning systems in the iPause. We send out messages to our internal and external partners through the use of Everbridge. We monitor Facebook and Twitter, Vine, Reddit, and all of those to get the information. And we are now implementing what is a National Capital Region dashboard. Our Arlington alerts are a web-based platform. We use Everbridge for this. They are used to send emergency and non-emergency alerts to the public. We use automated alerts for the weather systems. We actually will also use mass transit alerts, traffic alerts, life safety events that are going on in the county, as well as crime information if needed to find handguns that have been discarded due to a robbery or whatnot. We also have the capability of sending out public alerts through WIA. Our alerts right now, we have actually started implementing the many-to-one approach already. We send the alert out to the public using an app or on SMS text messages, and they can confirm the message, or they confirm it outside of the time window. They'll let us know automatically if that phone is not, or that email address is not reachable, and also they've not confirmed the message. That way we're getting important information that will actually let us know who's receiving the message. Most recently, we had a juvenile that made national news. It was where a child was left outside for 8 hours that could not find the parents. The police officers went and they put it on Twitter, and then we took it upon ourselves to actually initiate an alert and to use all the different senses, which, of course, we want to have happen so everybody has the equal access to the product. We have it out going as text messages, landline alerts, to your cell phone. It can go to an email. We can record a message, put a picture of the juvenile on there, and you can get it all in one massive blast for it to actually have happened. Next slide. Social media monitoring. Right now we are monitoring public alerts. We have hashtags that are used by the county for certain events such as weather or traffic. And we take these tweets and posts and we analyze them to see what's happening. We use this right now for only information gathering purposes. We do not monitor them for calls for safety or public safety action. Excellent. Jen, you could ask for.
One thing we're also just starting to implement in Arlington County is the NCR dashboard program. I'm the lead on that, so I have special love for it. And basically what it is a GIS, or a geographic information system that's based, it's a program that's based serving as a resource for coordination of information during real-time events and incidents all in one location. It's going to pull information from multiple resources in multiple jurisdictions here in the NCR. Emails, traffic cams, weather alerts, social media, CADs, mapping, and et cetera, for timely dissemination amongst participating agencies in the NCR. And it's just proof of things that active shooters or anything that's live that's happening in here, instead of reading 10, however many emails, it's all going to be integrated into one system that we can be all alerted at once. And again, providing the best possible information to the citizens as we're getting it.
Currently, Arlington County just received our iPause license, so we can actually now send them out. Currently, the only people that are allowed to authorize an alert to go out is our director of the Office of Emergency Management, the deputy director, our AC administrator, or one of the OEM duty officers. They will contact someone in the watch desk, and we will actually be the ones to initiate the iPause message. There are policies in the works right now to actually give us the authorization to determine, with our education, to actually send one out to the public. And so this is actually a very important thing for me, and I really do believe that we need to have the ability to send these alerts out to the public. It'll actually help the PSAPs focus on their primary job more so, and that is life safety. So thank you very much for allowing us to come out.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Jennifer. I think that was very illuminating. And now our second case study is going to be presented by Jay English, who is the director of the Communication Center and 911 Services for the Association of Public Safety Communication Officials International, or APCO. So, Jay, thank you very much for presenting. Good afternoon. And thank you to the Commission and to the Bureau for the honor of being part of the presentation. We'll go ahead and kick off with the first slide, please. This use case, unlike the last one, is a real-world example. And actually, Admiral Simpson happened to be in the local area the day this happened. So, interestingly enough, he got advised by the emergency manager involved after the fact of this use case. I strongly suspect that's why I'm here today. I'm going to take you to Seminole County, Florida on February 21st, 2014. And Seminole County is just north of Orlando. Population's about 450,000 folks. And they have the typical mix of high schools and junior high schools and elementary schools and private schools. It also happens to be where I ran my last PSAP before coming to APCO. We have a consolidated public safety answering point. The Sheriff's Department handles the law enforcement for the 7 agencies. Fire EMS handles 5 consolidated fire rescue agencies in a mutual aid system. At 12:16, and we can move on to the next slide, at 12:16 p.m. on February 21st, a nightmare scenario unfolded. For anyone who has been in public safety, an active shooter at a school is your worst day. And it came in at 12:16 p.m. that we had an active shooter in the Lake Mary High School. That immediately initiates what is called a code red. And code red means that the high school locks down, the neighboring middle school locks down, law enforcement officers from multiple agencies deploy, fire and EMS stage at predetermined locations, and wait for the bad news. Law enforcement's primary role is to respond, secure the scene, and determine the extent of the incident. Units were on scene in minutes, and units from all agencies were on scene and staged. Next slide, please. However, before the first sheriff's deputy can clear his car, there have been text messages sent from students inside the school to their parents. Twitter is already involved as of 12:16 p.m., the same time the 911 call came in. Tweets are flying across the airwaves telling people there is a shooter at the school. Parents are the recipient of many of these messages. The Seminole County Public Safety Answering Points and Emergency Operations Center have state-of-the-art emergency notification services systems. They are integrated into multiple levels of the community, including through the county's own website. However, public safety has an obligation not to report information until they have the facts. A deputy cannot glean the facts in 30 seconds. So we have deputies trying to arrive on scene, and while they are responding, the public is already being notified that there is a shooter at the high school. Next slide, please. This is unconfirmed data, but the students who are involved think it's real, and they are simply passing on information based on what they know inside the school. They've been locked down. They're hiding in the cafeteria. They're being told to get under desks. 1,600 tweets related to this incident are sent in the next 60 minutes. By 12:30 p.m., 14 minutes after the initial call is received, deputies have cleared the high school. That is an amazing job on the part of law enforcement. They have verified there is no active shooter. However, to do so, they had to get through nearly 300 parents who had arrived on scene either before or as they were arriving. At 12:30 p.m., the PSAP and Emergency Management Center start to send out notifications using the ENS system and using Twitter and Facebook, advising the community this is not an actual event. Do not respond to the schools. Your children are safe. Unfortunately, the text messages, tweets, and Facebook posts beat them to it. Next slide, please. In this particular case, the best efforts by public safety could not overcome social media. Parents flooded the school. The sheriff's office, fire EMS did their jobs, and they did it properly and in a timely fashion, and still could not get ahead of the information power curve. Thankfully, in this particular case, this was a false alarm. It was called in by a 12-year-old, yes, a 12-year-old, who was arrested 3 days later. Next slide, please. In the public safety answering point community, the 911 community, we have a number of tools at our disposal. And as was just pointed out, those tools are incredible. The one-to-many capabilities that most PSAPs have at their fingertips today can help us avoid situations like this. In this particular incident, we got lucky.
it was not a real event. It could just as easily have been an active shooter. Had that been the case, parents would have gone into what we call a hot zone, where bullets are literally flying, trying to save their kids. And I'm a parent. Many of you probably are too. You want your kids to be okay, and you'll do anything to make sure that happens, including running into a building that's either on fire or has a shooter. Public safety is trying to do the same thing, and we can't help you if you get there first. With the systems that are in place, and like those that were just demonstrated, we have an opportunity from the PSAP level to use some incredible infrastructure with the support of the FCC and other federal agencies, and information sharing systems like IPAWS and WIA, next slide please, tie them into the PSAPs, use enabling technologies that there are many vendors already working on to integrate these capabilities into computer-aided dispatch, 911, and alerting systems so that you have a single platform enabled by the PSAPs, the 911 telecommunicators, who are the first person you call, that first responder. Those folks can get information out quickly, they can get at it effectively, and they can get it out using existing infrastructure by integrating multiple technologies. And thanks to the work being done here and by PSAPs all over the country, we're closer than ever to making that integrated approach a very real capability. And I want to thank the Commission, I want to thank the Bureau for having me here and for being part of what I think is a very important effort, because at the end of the day, like everything we do in public safety, this is about saving lives, and it doesn't get any more important than that. So thank you very much.
Our next case study is an actual case study. Is going to be a presentation by the Alaska Department of Homeland Security on how you really stage an integrated test, how you really put together a public safety exercise that is a 360-degree exercise that uses all of the capabilities of the Public Safety Office as well as of the information that one gets from the public. So if we're ready to go on that one, this is going to be brought to you via live remote from Alaska. I'll be introducing to you Brian Fisher, who's the Chief of Operations for the Alaska Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. Dennis Bookey, who is a Vice President of Kodiak Island Broadcasting, and is the chair of the Alaska SECC for the EAS folks among us. Sam Albanese, who's the meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service Anchorage Forecast Officer. Cindy Preller, Tsunami Program Manager, and the Education and Outreach Coordinator for the National Weather Service's Alaska region. Thank you very much.
Anchorage, Alaska, and we wanted to thank the Commission and Greg and John specifically for allowing us to talk about our case study here today. Before we get into the slides, just a couple of pieces of background from us here. I've worked for the last 20 years for the state of Alaska in the Emergency Management Office. Dennis Bookey has been the chair of our State Emergency Communications Committee this entire time. Sam Albanese and Paul Whitmore from NOAA, both the National Weather Service and the National Tsunami Warning Center, we have all worked together for the last 20 years. And as we talk about technology in our case study here, one of the big lessons I think that we wanted to share with everybody is the fact that the key to successfully integrating emergency management and public safety answering points into the emergency alert system and the new technologies is personal relationships. Those of us that you see in the room here on the video have been working together for more than 20 years now in making sure that Alaska is able to successfully warn its citizens and visitors in case of an emergency. And all the technology in the world is not going to solve our problem unless we can work together between local, state, federal, non-governmental organizations and the citizens themselves to make sure that we can get these messages out. We cannot the slides here, so hopefully that was slide one. Next slide, please. So what we'd like to talk about today is the tsunami warning system for Alaska. Alaska has more coastline than any any country or any state in the nation. We are highly susceptible. Kind of as the emergency manager for the state, my worst case scenario is a tsunami that's going to affect our coastal communities. So the problem that we faced back in the early 2000s, we hadn't had a lot of tsunami warnings that were broadcast over the emergency alert system. In 2003, we had 3 tsunami warnings that were real that we discovered failed miserably across the emergency alert system. The problem that we discovered after those three tsunami warnings that were sent and not passed everywhere they needed to be was the fact that EAS equipment from the manufacturers were not automatically programmed off the shelf to pass that particular event code in the emergency alert system. We all are mandated in the EAS community to do tests via the Part 11 rules. Every participant does a weekly test. The state had initiated the monthly tests every month. That tests that particular code, but it did not test, and we did not discover that the tsunami warning events were not passed until we needed them. So with that in mind, we needed to determine a way to test the live system, if you will, the actual code. And I think the Commissioner and Greg and the Admiral mentioned trying to synchronize the visual message with the audio message in the EAS equipment that's out there now. A real serious problem for us. We wanted to test sending the message, a tsunami warning's been issued for all of Alaska, but had to find a way to visually tell the public that it was only a test. And the equipment at the time was not capable of doing that. So that was kind of our problem in trying to figure this out so we could correct the deficiencies that we had, implement corrective actions, and hopefully for the next tsunami warnings that we have, get that information passed out. Dennis, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think broadcasters want to make sure it works right, the way the format of the system is set up. Like Brian said, you run that required monthly test. The engineering department of each of those radio stations makes sure it's immaculate and that runs. Well, that has nothing to do with all the rest of the codes that can come down the system to activate and notify the public, and that's what we had to go to work on, is guarantee that it got through.
Next slide, please. So our solution to this problem was the determination at the state level with our partners at the National Weather Service and the National Tsunami Warning Center, the Alaska Broadcasters Association, and local broadcasters and cable operators around the state to do this live code test. We wanted to send the tsunami warning message out in a test environment, an exercise environment, and troubleshoot every station in the coastal Alaska to make sure that they were able to get that message, pass it, and the citizens could hear that warning. In order to do so, we discovered along the way, and there was lots of growing pains in this, but I think it was amazingly successful. We had great partnerships with the Federal Communications Commission and NOAA and the Weather Service in Washington, D.C. to allow this to happen. Needed to apply for a waiver of the Part 11 rules to allow us to do a test using a real code to ensure that we were able to meet the other requirements to pass emergency information both orally and visually and have that the same. So a lot of work on that.
And I can say that it was very controversial, and there were plenty of people in the lower 48 that thought we were nuts.
Without a doubt. So one of our requirements in order to obtain that waiver, a very robust public outreach and mitigation plan. The mitigation was really to prevent panic. We had some cases in the 90s where tsunami warnings were issued. Folks had run up the hill, if you will, up the mountainside in some coastal areas, and we had some issues with that, with either false alarms or having people panic and take responsive actions to get away from the coastline and have some injuries or heart attacks and things like that. So what we didn't want to do was cause the local residents in coastal Alaska to run up the hill during this test for us to try to troubleshoot our equipment. In order to do so, and because we have a great partnership with the Alaska Broadcasters Association and our local media, we developed a series of public service announcements. We had press conferences. We decided to manually inject a background slide during the test that clearly stated it was a test, even though the EAS crawl said otherwise. A very important part of it was the technical analysis and documentation for us to check the black boxes, if you will, and all the widgets after the test to see where the message was being stopped and why it wasn't getting through. And as important to us was to get feedback from the public. We knew right off the bat that if we were going to send this thing out and we did not give the public a mechanism to provide feedback to us, positive, negative, either way, that the test environment would be a failure and we wouldn't be able to continue to do this, which was critical for us to get the word back. Public safety answering points and emergency services organizations around the state of Alaska were key and integral in conducting this test. They listened to local TV and radio for us because our state emergency operations center and local EOCs and PSAPs already had relationships. They were a great set of eyes and ears for us just to watch TV and listen to the radio to hear if it came through. As all of you know in the audience for this meeting here, every time the emergency alert system fires off or tsunami sirens or weather sirens go off, 911 centers are inundated with phone calls from the public. Even when it's clear and specific what the issue is. So we had a very robust plan to communicate with our PSAPs and local public safety agencies, our school districts across the state of Alaska, to make sure that they were well aware ahead of time that this test was coming, that it was only a test, and that they could either prepare additional staffing in the call centers or get the word out locally to try to minimize the impact to 911 services.
And one thing to add is that the mitigation efforts go way beyond a typical media dissemination. NOAA is very involved, and I mean, right down to talking to school districts, to a lot of one-to-one communication with people that could be affected. So it's pretty elaborate, the amount of advanced communication that takes place ahead of the test.
Next slide, please. So the actual test that we conducted, and this started back in 2005. Like I said, we had some issues with real tsunami warnings in 2003. It took us about a year to figure out how we were going to tackle the issue. It was fairly timely. That was just after the tsunami in the Indian Ocean in Indonesia that killed over 250,000 people.
That definitely set the table for people paying attention to it.
So just a little bit of background. The way the system works is our nation's National Tsunami Warning Center detects earthquake or seismic activity, determines that there may be a tsunami generated from it. They send that information out to the National Weather Service, to state and local emergency management agencies. They transmit it electronically. In Alaska at the time, that message was taken by the National Weather Service and our forecast offices across the state and put on NOAA Weather Radio, which is what it was called at the time, now NOAA All Hazards Radio. Our state emergency alert system picked that up from the National Weather Service and NOAA Weather Radio and fed it into what at the time was the daisy chain of EAS in this state. Our communications infrastructure very, very lacking in redundancy, and wasn't really a web architecture, much more of the traditional daisy chain in EAS. And then it's carried across the state through our state relay network to our 21 primary points and then out to the public and the other participating EAS stations. So that was in general terms, that's what we wanted to test, to send that tsunami warning event code from the National Weather Service into the EAS system and then find where it was being stopped from programming issues in the boxes or other connectivity issues that we had not discovered before this event. Again, key to that was follow up to all of our operational areas in the state. We have 21 of them. They don't cover every single community in our state because of the communications infrastructure, but it was a multi-pronged approach where the Alaska Broadcasters Association talked to every television and radio station and the cable system operators after or during the test to see if they received it. While we on the emergency management side were communicating with the local public safety answering points and emergency operations centers to see if they saw it, to get immediate feedback on any panic that might have happened when they saw the warning come across television. It was never a problem for radio. radio in the emergency alert system, we can say what we want to say in the audio portion of the message. This was really the problem set was with the television and cable systems with the visual crawl that comes across from the EAS equipment. Next slide. So a couple of examples here of what we did, and we'll see if this actually works here. On the right side of that slide there, a couple of versions of the slide decks that we had to manually inject in all of our broadcast television and cable systems behind the test screen to make sure that people knew. Our public service announcement, community service announcement campaign was large and extensive, and we'll see if this goes through. There's a radio version of our public service announcement and a video one at the bottom there, if we could try to play those.
Alaska Broadcasters, the National Weather Service, and Alaska Division of Emergency Management Services will be conducting a test of the tsunami warning system today at approximately 9:45 a.m. You'll hear the test on the radio and see it on local and cable television. This test is part of Tsunami Preparedness Week in Alaska. Go to tsunami.gov/test to report your test reception. This test will be canceled in the event of any significant seismic activity.
Alaska Broadcasters, National Weather Service, and Alaska Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management will be conducting a test of the tsunami warning system Thursday, March 27th at approximately 10:15 a.m. This test will be conducted for portions of coastal communities in southeast Alaska, the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak, and the Aleutians. You'll hear the test on the radio and see it on local and cable television. Go to ready.alaska.gov to report your test reception. This test will be canceled in the event of any significant seismic activity.
Talk about the cancellation we did have in Japan. We did have a cancellation, just by the way, that we ran across because we did have significant seismic activity with the Japan tsunami very shortly after, and that certainly put the jitters in people in the state, and we canceled it that year.
Yeah, that was like about a week and a half before the planned test. It was
Right.
March 11th, and we were planning the test for the 24th. So it was about 2 weeks, and we did cancel it.
Another very crucial step that we decided between all of the partners at the state here was if there was that significant seismic activity, we did not want to get in the middle of it. Being a test, no, it's not really a test. So we made that decision. That happened one of the years that we've conducted this test, and it was, again, successful coordination between all of us in Alaska that know each other. To give a little bit of perspective, that video public service announcement that you saw there in the blinking southern coastline of the state of Alaska, that's probably 1,500 miles of coastline. We are an amazingly incredible state. We are in the Northwest. We're not right next to Hawaii like you see on most of the weather things, and we're a very, very big geographic state, but the relationships that we all have with our local emergency officials is we are kind of a small state. We have about 800,000 people population, so being able to reach out and have personal conversations with local officials in our coastal communities was critical to the success of our test process here. Next slide, please. So did want to also bring up some value added to the test that we were doing here. You know, honestly, Dennis and I, when this started with Paul from the Tsunami Warning Center and Sam and others from the National Weather Service, we wanted to test the equipment. This started as an equipment test to look at filters in EAS equipment and connectivity with our satellite dissemination systems and all. But very quickly, it was seen that we could do a lot more with this systems test, if you will, to turn it into real exercise to help encourage and promote general emergency preparedness and specific tsunami preparedness for our coastal communities. So I think you heard in one of the service announcements there, every year that we've been doing this since 2005, the governor of Alaska declares the week that we do this test Tsunami Preparedness or Tsunami Awareness Week, which brings a lot of credence around the state by having our governor proclaim awareness. We do this in March every year, and we do it around the anniversary of the Great Alaska Earthquake from 1964, where there were significant deaths and from tsunamis and the earthquake itself. So really helps us to promote all of our preparedness campaigns at the local levels. We're very involved with local emergency planning committees and community emergency response teams. And this was a way for us to empower them to carry the preparedness message to their communities. Siren testing is an important one. Most of our communities that have tsunami sirens or all hazard sirens test them weekly, like most counties or cities in the country do. They hear the chimes or the signal every Wednesday at noon or something. But this was specific. It was a different time. It was for a different purpose, and that outreach from the PSAPs and our local emergency to make sure that folks knew we're going to fire the sirens off, but it's not at the normal time, but it still is a test was really important. That evolved very rapidly into tsunami evacuation drills, real drills that many of our coastal communities and school districts took it upon themselves as when we sent this test message to test the equipment, to actually do evacuation drills. Get the kids out of the schools and follow the tsunami evacuation routes and go to the tsunami evacuation shelter areas. And which is always interesting to do in March. It's still pretty much winter up here in Alaska, but the community really embraced using this test as a forcing function, if you will, to do a lot more to promote tsunami preparedness. We also have a campaign similar to Storm Ready that the National Weather Service runs called Tsunami Ready. It's a similar program. And we were able to leverage the tests in the Awareness Week and the drills that we were doing to promote that, to try to encourage our very small coastal communities to join the Tsunami Ready program to improve the overall preparedness and response to tsunamis. Next slide, please. So the results of our tests, we absolutely were able to successfully identify and remediate issues. Some interesting pieces. Besides the technical glitches in the emergency alert system that we were working on and some procedural issues that we had at the warning point originator offices, was verbiage in the tsunami warning messages themselves. Lots of discussions with all of the communities and states and counties around the country that are threatened by tsunami. As part of these tests, we did do some work with the National Tsunami Warning Center to try to make the message better. To provide the most important information at the top of the message instead of the seismic data, things like that.
And that actually came out of real activations, because we would run into real confusion. In between all this, there were some real activations on the way too.
As the previous speakers also spoke, we have incorporated additional dissemination methods. We have vendors that provide additional software, auto dialer systems, broadcast text. That's not iPaws, things like that. So we've included those and are testing those frequently in the tsunami warning tests that we do. And at the beginning of this, we talked about the first ever live code, the nationwide live code test. Our tsunami tests led to that test becoming national. We did a smaller version of the EAN, the Emergency Action Notification Test, in Alaska because we were good at doing these live code tests, and that led to the first ever national EAN test. So we're very proud and thankful to be able to partner with the FCC and FEMA and NOAA in the successful activation of that first ever national emergency action notification test. And what we were really trying to get at, and we've seen in the last 10 years, was successful or improved delivery of tsunami warnings for real events. Next slide. So the future of our program here, Alaska's EAS infrastructure has changed since 2005. With working with a vendor, we have the ability now to geo-target some of these tests. The emergency alert system has always supported that. NOAA Weather Radio or NOAA All Hazards Radio has always supported that, but our lack of communications infrastructure in the state precluded us from being able to target these warning messages. So at the beginning, we were sending tests, tsunami warnings, real and in the test environment, to communities that were hundreds and hundreds of miles away from the coast. At this point, we're able to geographically target. That public service announcement you saw is what we do now, is we target these tests to the coastal communities, because it doesn't need to be heard in Fairbanks, Alaska, which is 500 miles away from any tsunami threat or more. Incorporation of WIA, we still look forward to that. We've had a lot of discussions on whether we can send the tsunami warning in the test or exercise environment across that system, but we are looking forward to future, the ability to test that system in Alaska. We expanded our live code testing to include the child abduction emergency. Our problem with that was that code was new back in the early 2000s. So again, we wanted to make sure that CAE code at our broadcasters and cable operators was programmed correctly, so we can do that there. A lot of talk today, and we're very encouraged, utilization of the Common Alert Protocol for content-appropriate visual messages. So we can synchronize that audio message with the visual message and provide more appropriate information than the limitations in the legacy EAS system. And as important to the state of Alaska, incorporation of access and functional needs technology. We have hundreds of languages spoken in this state, a little uniqueness. Some of our native Alaskan languages are not written. They are only spoken, so not sure that technology is the answer there, but again, we have some very personal relationships with our communities and our native villages, and sometimes it's as simple as sending the EAS and then getting a UPIC speaker on the air in partnership with our broadcast radio and television stations to translate those warning messages into our native Alaskan tongues. And I believe that is what we had. Thank you very much again for the opportunity to present from Anchorage. Saved us a bit of time and money from having to fly to the East Coast, so we really appreciate being able to participate in the workshop today.
Really? So that was great. Thank you. I'm looking back over my shoulder to Alaska. Yes, sir.
For the audience, the technicians are working on the AC. You may have felt a little bit of
Yes.
cool come out, and they're not going to rest until they get the...
No, that's rapidly on its own. I think we all needed that. So thank you. Amazingly enough, we're right on time. So we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back with the first panel. If you recall, the bathrooms are in the next hall down. And thank you all very much. Okay, this is the 2-minute warning. Okay, we're going to get started now, please. Can people hear me? Okay, good. Okay, good. Anyhow, the way we're going to structure the panel is that I'm going to introduce the panelists. They'll each give a short 5-minute presentation, and then we're going to have Q&A. So we're going to have a round table, and I will be initiating those questions. So let me just first introduce the panel, and then they can start do their presentations. Immediately to my left is Jay English, as we know, who's the Director of the Communications Center and 911 Services for APCO. Next to him is Wade Whitmer, who is the Deputy Director of the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System Division of DHS's FEMA. Then we have Steve Souter, who is the Director of the Fairfax County, Virginia Department of Public Safety Communication and Chair of the PSAP Task Force. And then last but not least, by any means, is Suzanne Goucher, who is the President of CEO of the Maine Association of Broadcasters and is the Chair of the Maine State Emergency Communications Committee and Chair of the Joint National Association of Broadcasters, the National Alliance of State Broadcasters Association, and is one of our primary go-to people when it comes to the emergency alert system. So, Jay, why don't you lead it off?
Well, good afternoon again. And I don't have slides. I'm not going to bore you with those. This is really kind of a continuation of what you've already seen introduced in the use cases. And from APCO's perspective at a national level, dealing with over 6,000 PSAPs in the United States and tens of thousands of response agencies, as we move into the world of next generation 911 and truly interconnected PSAPs, all using Internet protocol-based systems. The ability to realize interoperability is close at hand. And along with interoperability and the ability of our PSAPs to communicate with each other in real time and to communicate information to our responders in real time, we have a tremendous opportunity, as all of the previous speakers have mentioned, as Admiral Simpson mentioned, to start to reach out to our public in more effective ways, and to do it from a one-to-many approach, as well as getting actionable information from our citizens back to our PSAPs to help us make our response more effective. And quite frankly, from the responder perspective, to make it safer. More intelligence to me as a responder is good, and it helps me complete my task, and it helps me make sure that I am focused on the right suspect, the right target, the right situation, and it keeps the blinders off. In the PSAP world, we are often tied to a single call and a single telecommunicator, and in a next generation 911 environment, we will have multimedia capabilities that our kids and grandkids take for granted. But in our PSAPs and in our law enforcement agencies, we're just now starting to be able to use. That multimedia capability, the ability to receive data from multiple sources and to triage an event before our responders even arrive, will save us minutes on every call. And as anybody in public safety can tell you, minutes equate to lives saved. 4 minutes from the time someone starts a cardiac event, 4 minutes after that, irreversible brain damage sets in. If I can get my responders to the event 4 minutes sooner, we will save tens of thousands of lives. If we can get an alert out to the public 4 minutes before a tornado hits, we will save thousands of lives. If we can do it effectively and target the area that's geographically impacted and do it quickly and efficiently, we will save lives. So that's how important this work is to the public safety community, and our job is every day to go out and make sure that you are safe. And in order to do that, we have to be able to communicate with you, and we have a tremendous opportunity to do that more effectively than ever. And the fact that the Commission and the Bureau are taking this so seriously and forwarding their goals and their ideas in the form of these workshops and enabling technologies, I think is encouraging. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here. It is an exciting time in public safety, an exciting time for all of us, and I think the best is yet to come when it comes to how we can use this technology to save lives and make the world a better place, for lack of a better way of saying it. So thank you again.
Thanks, Jay. Wade?
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I appreciate the time to be here on the workshop panel, Greg. And so IPAWS, Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, that's that little piece that's living at FEMA today and is operational, and there are a lot of emergency alert-related messages that are flowing through the system every day. In fact, we probably see a volume of about, we're at something like 40 messages an hour that move through the system. Now, a large part of those are test messages, either EAS required weekly test messages, required monthly test messages, or other messages moving through the system that sometimes count as advisories besides just warnings. But from a user base continuing to grow, we have about 800 users through IPAWS. That includes about 64 state-level agencies across 49 states, and then 500 plus local authorities. Those local authorities range from police, from emergency management, to county EOCs, county emergency operations centers. There are PSAPs. There's somewhere between 10 and 20 PSAPs that we know of that are authorized IPAWS users today. There's a large number of sheriff's offices, which, if you didn't know, a lot of times the PSAP functionality is contained within the sheriff's office at a county level. So usage, I mentioned that we see a lot of messages. Actual alert messages going through the system is increasing too. Of course, the largest majority of messages that flow through the system are still National Weather Service severe warnings sent to some small area somewhere in the country. And that number is something like 12,000 warnings across the last 2 years that have been from the National Weather Service. There's been, I want to say, about 400 or 500 AMBER alerts sent by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or there are actually 2 states that have direct access to send AMBER alerts through the iPause system. Of that usage, we think that there's really only, of our number of users that we have out there, about 10% of them are local users that have sent messages through, that have used the system to either do a real-time activation and send an alert message across emergency alert system through EAS or through to the cellular phones as a wireless emergency alert. But we're seeing that usage go up, and in fact, we're starting to count that on a weekly basis. 2 weeks ago, there were 6 local usages through iPause. One of those was both wireless emergency alerts and EAS, and the others were wireless emergency alert only. 2 of those messages were evacuations for a fire warning area, and one of the messages was actually a boil water alert. So the piece is real. I think we are still learning, as well as the users who are online, as well as the potential number of users that are out there are still learning how to use the system, how to more efficiently communicate with the public, be that in the messaging that they use, the timing of those messages, and how they disseminate them across both radio and TV broadcast, as well as to small little areas as wireless emergency alerts. So, and we look forward to, actually, another piece I wanted to quickly mention is that of the users that we've seen use it, their first time use a lot of times results in an error that we end up in the middle of trying to help them either during their event or after their event make a correction to how they sent that message through to get the results that they were looking for. We have since stood up a lab in our iPause lab in Jiddick, Maryland, the capability for users to point their tools at the lab, which I'll say we have an offline version of iPause there that has full capabilities of the production version. When they send those messages to our lab, we push those results back to them in a separate website that shows them what it will look like on the EAS system across radio and TV, what it will look like on cell phones that they've directed it to, as well as how those messages will be purveyed through the alerting feed, which is monitored by a variety of different internet applications and web tools. So looking forward to the discussions, Greg. Thank you.
Thank you, Wade. Steve.
Good afternoon, and Commissioner Claiborne, if you're watching from your office, thank you very much for asking that this workshop occur, and to Greg and to Admiral Simpson, thank you for pulling it off and for inviting me and others to participate. I couldn't help but reflect back upon some of the opening remarks by the Admiral. If you watch CBS Evening News on Tuesday evening, they played some tapes that were received by the New Orleans 911 Center during the onslaught of Katrina. And I couldn't help but reflect back and wonder how that might have been different had they had today the technology that they didn't have back then. In the National Capital Region, and many of you in this room perhaps reside here, and some of you are simply visiting, but there are 23 different jurisdictions, each of which have some form of Office of Emergency Management. Of those 23 jurisdictions, there are 12 911 centers that serve those jurisdictions. Very recently, within the last 18 months, we completely changed out our emergency notification platform, our infrastructure, so that we are now operating on the same infrastructure. This provides us a huge increase in capability for sending out alerts. And although we have talked about major events, the tsunamis and the other things which happen only occasionally in our lives, the reality is that in the National Capital Region, We use the alerting system every day. I can assure you that before 6 o'clock tonight, there'll be alerts posted by my agency, not for a tsunami and not for an earthquake and not for a tornado or not for a hurricane, but it'll be because of traffic on I-66 westbound at Nutley Street. And I say that only because the public demands that. They rely upon that. And even though we are fortunate in the NCR to have two 24/7 FM all-news radio stations and one all-news television station, still combined with them, the public that reside in our community and the other 22 communities in the NCR depend upon the alerts that they get routinely from their local public safety and 911 people, advising them of things simply as important to them as how can I get home in time for dinner. Similarly, and I don't know what the forecast is today, but earlier this week, and I believe it was Monday night, the alerts were going out like crazy for a pending significant, very significant thunderstorm front that was typically moving from west to east. The alerts began at about 1900 or 7 p.m. By about 11:30, the storms had arrived, but by that time, because people knew they were coming, the lawn furniture had been tied down and all the other things you do to simply prepare for the routine everyday emergency. So I say all of that to say that even though we think about alerts when it comes to big, bad, major events that we hope never occur, but surely will, they also have a significant role in the everyday life of our communities, both across this region and I would suggest to you. So I welcome hearing some questions in the future, and again, thank you for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you, Steve. Suzanne, you're up.
Greg, how are you?
I'm doing very well.
Good.
Yourself?
How's everyone doing today? Good. I think I want to start with a grammar lesson, channeling my inner Mrs. Green from sophomore year of high school, because we've been using a lot of terms here interchangeably, and they are not interchangeable. We've been talking about alerts and warnings and notifications, and I want to take the word alert away from everything else and box it into the emergency alert system and wireless emergency alerts. That is not for the traffic jam. That is not necessarily for thunderstorms, which are predictable. That is for sudden, unforeseen, unpredictable events that pose an imminent threat to life or property, the nature of which precludes advanced notification. It's fabulous that we have all these many different ways of letting people know what's going on these days. And as a matter of fact, I still kind of scratch my head that the Massachusetts State Police issued the shelter-in-place warning for Watertown during the hunt for the Boston Marathon bombers by Twitter. And that was it. They didn't issue an EAS alert, which astounded me until I thought about it and said, well, okay, probably every media outlet in Massachusetts was monitoring the Massachusetts State Police Twitter feed and could get the information on the air very quickly. So that was almost probably just as good as an emergency alert, but didn't fire off cell phones in Worcester where there was no shelter in place. So, you know, it was kind of social media geo-targeting. I think it's wonderful to think that we could have this one-to-many, many-to-one conversation. I get very nervous when I think that we might drag the emergency alert system into it, and here's why. The train scenario, the first woman who called 911 said something happened to the train. What happened to the train? The second gentleman said a bomb went off. The third woman gave up on trying to text 911 and called her sister. But what if she had called 911 and said, I'm on a train that's been in an accident and I see smoke billowing? And you've got three different public safety answering point people answering those questions. Which one pulls the trigger on an emergency alert? What's the message? Is it a bomb? I think we've got a lot of very serious top-level questions we need to answer before we start thinking of emergency alert system in terms of this other, one-to-many, many-to-one Twitter, Facebook conversation. It makes me very nervous to think that there are 6,000 PSAPs in the country, each of which may have 1,000 employees or 100 employees. So now we have 60,000 people with their finger on the red button. And how are we going to provide training for them? And how are we going to make sure that if they come to the point where they want to fire off an emergency alert, that they do it properly, without making a mistake the first time around, and for the right reason? I am all in favor of encouraging the use of the emergency alert system when it's appropriate. We've had 2 non-weather emergency alerts in Maine in the last 20 years, and in my view, that's how it should be, because it should rise to that extreme level of, I have got to get information out to a lot of people very quickly, and this is the only way I can do it. And so that works in tandem with all these other information and notification systems, but this should not necessarily automatically come over to the EAS realm, because it doesn't always rise to that level. And with that, I'll stop.
Thank you. Thank you. And I must say, that's a great segue, because this isn't easy. This isn't something that is a predetermined box that we can just move into in terms of suddenly empowering PSAPs. And I think that sort of leads me to the questions that I'd like to initiate with folks, because I think one thing to remember is the primary goal of an alert is to warn the right people of an event that's coming their way and direct them to life-saving action. It's as simple as that. And there's 50 years worth of social science backing that up. Until fairly recently, this is a fairly simple process. You had your trusted source, it's your government. You used private media, broadcast cable, to deliver a particular alert, which is EAS, most for weather. What else did you have? You'd have the sirens. You'd have, your hurricane siren. That's not the world in which we live now. And I think as Jay pointed out very, very well, you've got a plethora of communications methods out there, many of which are utterly non-regulated and are completely crowdsourced. So if you think that the government needs to maintain its role as the trusted source, okay, as opposed to, a tweet from someone who says the brush fire is here when it's really there, or go out of the train when you really, really shouldn't go out of the train, okay. How does the government maintain that? How do they not so much maintain control of information, but be able to aggregate it in such a way that then they can send it out to the right people? How do they pick the toolbox? I think one of the things we learned from listening to Arlington County is very, very effective ways of reaching people that are not EAS. Okay, how do you choose between what is a WIA, what is an EA, what is right for Arlington alerts, what's right for SMS, what's right for a tweet, and where do you put the power? So this is where I have my little visual aid. If I can get a little close up here. I know we're going to do this as a separate slide, but there it is. This is your PSAP, is your little circle here. Where can they reach? You can reach EAS, hopefully fairly soon, NOAA Weather Radio, WIAs, warning signs. How often do you go down I-66 and you see an amber? What a great place to see an amber alert is on that warning sign. We have the common protocols to allow us to fire those all off at once right now, okay? Electronic telephone notification, which is not necessarily a WIA, okay? And then regular media, social media, other jurisdictions, really cog to cog, and paging and calling key staff. This is where the knowledge is. So how do you, I'm going to put away the visual aid right now, how do you empower that entity to do, as Dave said earlier, to take advantage of the resources we have today, to be able to give that person the power to be able to target the correct alert to the correct person and not deflate the value of the EAS to which so many people have put so many resources for so many years. So, and how do you do this knowing that what you're looking at over the next 5 to 10 years is the complete Uberization of all communication, where it's, I'm living in this Venn diagram, the thing I want is over there, and how are we going to connect the two? And how do you keep that from descending into chaos in terms of the way people communicate actual physical danger to life and property to each other. So, with that in mind, I think one of the things we've seen from the 3 case studies that we've heard just offer consistent support for the proposition that state and local emergency management offices that fully integrate alerting, 911, social media, and other emergency communications functions into an integrated whole are more effective in alerting their communities about dangers than an emergency management office that silos these functions or doesn't even use EAS in the first place. So what I'm going to ask each of you to discuss, to open up the conversation, is how in your area of expertise, this two-way, many-to-one, one-to-many dynamic could, it's not necessarily there yet, but could improve the usefulness of the EAS for emergency managers. So for Suzanne, I'll lead with you because you are, we've worked together for many years, and you're committed to EAS, and you're in a position where you've worked with broadcasters and emergency management officials across the country. I think you've given us a pretty good idea, but how would you expand on that? How would you suggest that broadcasters can work with and then motivate the local emergency manager to use EAS appropriately? Okay, and how would you suggest that integrating EAS and IPAWS into overall Office of Emergency Management operations would make, assuming you want to make EAS a more attractive proposition for the emergency manager, which I think you kind of need to do if you don't want craziness. How do you do it? You've got 5 minutes.
Oh, boy. Well, as the folks in Alaska said, I think it starts with, opening the lines of communication. And, I've had a 20-year line, because I've been in my job for 20 years. I've had a 20-year line into Maine Emergency Management Agency. And just, keep those conversations going. We try to pull the State Emergency Communications Committee together on a fairly regular basis just to talk about anything that needs talking about. I think, WEA has kind of opened up a can of worms because now everybody thinks, well, wouldn't it be great just to be able to, target everybody's cell phone in the Portland metro? And it's an incomplete solution as best for that extreme EAS level event because I don't get WEAs on this. Some people get them, some people don't. But, folks are suddenly enamored of the fact that maybe they could do that geo-targeting, and it's a great idea, and, in some jurisdictions it may make perfect sense. Again, though, you've got to make sure you are using the system appropriately for only not the cat up the tree, not get your flu shot, but only those events that, rise to the level of an alert, sudden, unforeseen, imminent threat to life and property. So that obviously goes back to the training piece, which, Wade and his compadres have been working on. I actually sat in a meeting room in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania and you were there, you were in Gettysburg, working on the first IPAWS training module. That's a good solution as far as it goes, but then, the state and local folks have to turn around to the people who are actually going to be relaying their alerts and say, all right, now let's have a conversation about what's appropriate for our area. I would hope that nobody in Kansas would ever think about sending out a tsunami warning. That shouldn't even be in the code book. And, how are we going to use this appropriately so that it doesn't get used so often that people get inured to it and it becomes like the car alarm syndrome, which, is the last thing we want to have happen. When you hear those EAS alert tones, man, you want to be up out of your seat and ready to take action. And if you hear it too often, it becomes meaningless.
Thank you. Steve? Actually, Wade. Now, Wade, we've talked about, and I acknowledge what Suzanne says, because she is correct. The EAS is unique, and you don't want to dissipate its value by overuse. Nonetheless, I think one of the things we've learned is that in certain circumstances, there's nobody in a better position than that PSAP operator to initiate that alert. So when you and your office are offering IPAWS to localities, whether it's a state or a county or a city or whomever, how do you get them to buy into this? How do you get them to realize the value that it has for them to be part of this system? And if there are any problems, like, well, it's not geo-targeted enough, or it's this or it's that. But I mean, basically, it's been fairly effective. It's been very effective. How do you communicate that?
I'll tell you that right now, a lot of our communications efforts are because they've asked us to come. So the game is changing. We may have kicked that off, but it's changing EAS also. And really, the where we're at and where we're talking is a lot of regional, a lot of state, or a lot of local conferences that are public safety. And we usually start with the same pitch about here's what it can do and here's where it is today. And then we spend usually on the individual side a lot of time talking about if you need to figure out how you're going to use it. We don't have an answer. We don't present an answer as to what's appropriate to be used or how you should use it in that local area. We kind of say, here's some capabilities, and we recommend that you sit down and look at who is going to send alerts in your area, when they need to send them, for what, and then how. And then we help with that how part. And really, Suzanne, you kept speaking to the appropriateness, and we internally in the office had a struggle with alert versus warning versus notification, and we've decided to give up on that because it's an individual thing. It's a local, it's a community thing, and the word alert, frankly, has grown. It's huge. It's out of control. I don't think we're going to get it back. But I'll tell you, too, that sitting here in the bubble that is Washington, D.C., I don't think we can define that, and I don't think we should try to define what's appropriate for a county in a rural area of the Midwest. And I'll say that because we occasionally will pull the messages that are moving through the system and look at them and look at how people are using it. And we've seen one user who sends quite a few alerts, sometimes to EAS, but mostly to wireless emergency alerts for things that are boil water, things that are, there's going to be a water outage tonight after 12 o'clock. And then this person has even got into practice of actually putting his name into that message and his phone number. And so not a blip in the news, no complaints have we heard about that. And I started digging around and looking. It's a big area. It's a rural area. There's about 1 or 2 people per capita across that area. I have no idea what the cellular infrastructure looks like. There may only be 2 cell towers there, for all I know. But I assume that if he's sending messages that his public is upset with, that they'll get in touch with him. They probably will see him in the grocery store. They probably say, "Hey, I got your message last night about the water." And I'm assuming they're saying thank you, because I haven't heard any complaints, and he continues to do it over the last 6 months. So I think to figure out that appropriateness piece, I don't think we can. I think that the local public will manage that, and I think you mentioned community, and I think when we saw Alaska up there, that's the way to do it. In that room sat the state emergency management agency, the state public safety answering point representatives, as well as some local piece, and the broadcasters sat in that room. And they mentioned that it's a 20-year relationship that those folks have had in that room, and they've figured out how to do alerting. They do alerting so well that I think Brian mentioned towards the end that they led to how we did the first nationwide test. I'll say that really they taught us how to do that. We spent 2 years in Alaska, and they allowed us to practice on their people on how to do a nationwide EAS test. And so really that community piece, and that's what we're pushing. We try to gather use cases and deliver them back to the folks that are out there, and we're still learning, and I think the whole community is still learning how best to communicate and how to differentiate that piece that's an emergency versus, a notification, a non-emergency.
Okay, just let me follow up, and I'm trying to do my little quick research here. But when we all worked together on developing the WIA, it was based for the purposes of non-presidential, non-amber alerts on a fairly specific technical framework based on the Common Alerting Protocol. So I don't want to get too inside alerting baseball here, but there are elements of imminence and severity and urgency that were designed to give the alert initiator a tremendous amount of flexibility that a hurricane might not be imminent, whereas a storm surge might. A flash flood is imminent, where other things might not be. And we left that flexibility to the individual emergency manager to make sure that the right elements went into the right holes. So it would seem that something, unless there was a real water problem, how is that an imminent threat, and how does the system allow somebody to do that?
Because the guy who sent the message said it was an imminent threat.
Okay.
And I don't know. I've never been there. I don't know that how dependent his public is on water. He knows his public. He knows what his people need to hear, and he knows how to communicate with them. And I'll just flip back to saying we've heard no complaints and see his number of messages continue to go up. So I'm assuming that his public, I'm betting that his public appreciates how he's communicating with them. So really it's, and I think if you flip back, every message is assigned an urgency, a severity, uncertainty, and it's assigned by the message writer. And he's the guy that knows the area he's sending that message to, and he knows what's urgent, severe, and certain. And he knows what his public expects him to assign that. So he's the local guy with the local connection in that community perspective. And I think really, the other piece that we haven't really got there in CAP yet, but the ability to just move that message through to whatever that be it the radio station, be it the individual user on his cell phone, allow them to select what they want to hear about too. That's a goal for our future, and I think you see that in when we talk about broadcast, you still have today a lot of you have a person in the middle there that's doing some interpretation. That's another person who knows their community and what their community expects to hear. What is urgent to that community? What's severe to that community?
In a lot of cases you don't, though. A lot of radio stations are automated, and they just set their CAP boxes, their EAS boxes to pass these and ignore these. And so, you don't necessarily have that filter. I mean, we have a structure in Maine where Maine Emergency Management and the State Department of Public Safety are the only people who can push the red button on EAS because we want that filter in the middle. Mm-hmm. We don't allow the counties to send out their own alerts. We don't have alerting boxes in the counties. They all want to jump on board with WIA, and, that's fine as long as they go through the training and do, all the credentialing that they need to do. But, you talk about letting a 911 operator issue an Amber Alert. An Amber Alert is a law enforcement function. You don't want a disgruntled ex-spouse calling and accusing the ex-spouse of taking the children or filing a false Amber Alert, and you need that filter. That's not an immediate 911 operator finger on the red button. You need a filter for that. Okay. Is what's really happening here?
That's perfect, because now I can segue over to Steve, because then the question is, how does this work for you? I mean, how do you verify? But I mean, the question for Steve then is, same thing. You're a 911 expert, and how has this worked for you? Certainly, we've talked about opportunities, but how would you identify obstacles and problems that PSEPs and OAMs may face in becoming alert initiators, and how can the folks who actually deliver the alerts, broadcasters and others, how can they help inform PSEPs and OEMs to be good alert initiators?
Well, I really appreciate Suzanne's point of view from her perspective in the state of Maine. And we've all heard the term, all politics are local. And a lot of times the local expectation of the population that you're serving dictates the kind of alerts that you're going to be issuing. My call takers are highly skilled in sending an alert. They are not tasked with determining whether the alert should be sent. There is a vetting, a hierarchy process that evolves, usually originating from the incident commander at the scene of an event, whatever that may be, or perhaps even the Office of Emergency Management, which is adjacent to us in the same building. I brought these cards not knowing whether or not they would be of any value or not, but for those of you that may not be able to see from afar, our system is called Fairfax Alerts, meaning that Fairfax County is alerting its population to events that, one, the county believes it's important that they know, and secondly, and quite frankly, many times we have been told by the community they want to be alerted by. When we began our revised system about 2 years ago, we did it cautiously, we did it prudently, and we had no complaints about what we were doing. The complaints were what we were not doing. They were not providing the information which the public needed on a routine basis for them to operate, for them to prepare, for them to travel, if you will. So one of the bullets on this form says, receive weather, traffic, and emergency alerts. Well, weather and traffic we'll concede are more routine, and emergency are just that. But the public wants to be alerted the way we are alerting them currently. But again, go back to that critical element in this whole process, which is the call taker. They can issue the alert, but they're not going to say, I think this deserves to be alerted. There's going to be a vetting process, internal and sometimes external, that gives them the authority and the right to push the button, if you will.
And I think that's, I didn't mean to disparage 911 operators. I know they work very hard and they work under pressure. I think, I meant to inject that vetting process in there. It shouldn't be just an automatic, as soon as you hear Amber Alert, you push the red button. There's got to be some filtering and some vetting going on there to make sure that, is this an opt-in system? So
it is an opt-in system.
It is an opt-in system. Okay.
Yeah.
So I ask you to send me alerts for Fairfax County. I want to know where the traffic jams are. Okay, on a push system like Amber Alert, where it's not, it goes to a wide area, it's not whether you've opted in or not. I mean, it's going out over radio or television. I think you have to have that filtering and that, is this truly an Amber Alert, or is it just, a high school kid with too much time on his hands playing a prank?
Let's switch over to Jay and get his take on this, because as an emergency, if you've been an emergency manager, you're at APCO, you've talked in your use case about how you integrate this model into your system, and I think, to be fair, this is exactly the sort of chaos that did happen in Seminole is exactly what we're trying to avoid by coordinating these systems. Yeah, not everything is appropriate for EAS, and that cat in the tree could be an escaped tiger, so it might be just right for a very targeted SMS alert. So, so for Jay, how do you suggest that EOMs can best integrate EAS in their toolbox, in the tool quiver, as it were? And how do you automate it, and how do you work it out with computer-aided dispatch, et cetera?
I think it's interesting to have heard the other perspectives first, and I can appreciate some of the concerns. The chaos, as you put it, that happened in Seminole really wasn't from the PSAP side. It was from Twitter and Facebook and uncontrolled social media getting information out ahead of public safety. And actually, Seminole County uses a really neat system called Alert Seminole. And what they do is it is a subscription service. So all you have to do is sign up with the county emergency management department and give them basic information, and you opt into what kinds of alerts you want to get, but as soon as you give us your information, you're going to get all the emergency alerts. And it allows us to communicate, as Steve said, with our citizens kind of in an informed fashion. In the PSAPs, as Steve also mentioned, our folks are highly trained, and anybody who hasn't seen an operation like a 911 center should go sit in there for 8 hours and see how many tasks each individual telecommunicator has. We're not asking for more work, but we are asking to be allowed to use some of these tools more efficiently. So integrating any kind of alert or warning system or just a notification system into the many tools that emergency managers and PSAP directors currently have is a good path forward. Computer-aided dispatch systems are more and more sophisticated all the time. They're generally based on GIS systems. They allow us to geo-target events. They allow us to manage events, not just respond to them. Integrating the ability to alert a targeted population through things like our computer-aided dispatch systems allows us to do our jobs better. And we're not suggesting that you should completely take over the EAS system, and certainly not do it in an uninformed fashion. But our folks are highly trained professionals that deal with trauma and tragedy and urgent situations every minute of every day. They don't want to pull the trigger on something that's not accurate. That's why you don't send an alert out or a warning out or a notification out until you have vetted information. By the same token, the PSAPs can get information out quickly and efficiently and use things like IPAWS and WIA, understanding that they have to be trained and that there are certainly certification processes that have to be undertaken and the training has to be thorough, but our folks are good at that. And telecommunicators are some of the best at handling emergencies that you'll find. And I think you wouldn't have 6,000 PSAPs with 100 folks in each with their fingers on the trigger, so to speak. You'd have 6,000 toolkits available that could, in an informed and professional fashion, pull the trigger when it's appropriate. And that's our goal. You know, we don't want our citizens to go uninformed. And we have a lot of tools, whether it's computer-aided dispatch, whether it's our radio systems, whether it's our partnership with broadcasters in the local area. I've run Code 3, and I won't tell you how fast, in a police car to a news station back before we had Amber Alerts to get information on the 6 o'clock news about a missing kid. That's how important broadcasters have been to us in law enforcement for decades. Now we can use things like the technologies that are out there to get Amber Alerts out on those road signs. And PSAPs can push that information. But the telecommunicator doesn't make that call. A law enforcement officer who takes a report and determines that this is in fact a missing child will then send typically to the director or on-duty supervisor of PSAP a request to issue an Amber Alert. There's a very, very strict process from the PSAP perspective that you have to go through to issue that alert. And you have to go through not only the federal system, but also local, jump through some local hoops to get that out onto the highways. There are more efficient ways to do that with next generation 911 capabilities, with IP-based systems, with some of the tools that some very progressive vendors are starting to put into the hands of PSAPs. There are ways to utilize multimedia right now to get information out to the public very quickly and to get information back from the public about specific incidents. But we do want to do it carefully. So I can appreciate the concerns. I also think we need to start looking at using the technology to better determine what's a warning, what's a notification, and then what really meets the emergency alert criteria, and how do we then cooperate to get that really urgent information out more efficiently. But I think that we're a lot closer to that than we used to be, and there are a lot of tools out there, Greg, that we can use.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. I think we have one question from the floor. So if we can get a mic over to Brian Joseph of CTIA, and then I have two other questions that we've gotten in over our website that I want to be able to ask. Please, Brian.
Thanks, Greg, and I'll keep it quick. Brian Joseph with CTIA. I think this is a great discussion. I think some great points have come up. One point that on behalf of wireless emergency alerts I want to make is the highly personal nature of cell phones, of people receiving, and I'm glad Suzanne put her finger on the nomenclature here of alerts, notifications, etc. There are different levels, and Greg, your chart of the various options of alerting the public. What we in the wireless field have seen is people are very concerned about the inundation of alerts, notifications on their devices, particularly if unsolicited. And I think just because we may have the tool, we have to be very careful, and the training is critical, so as not to send the alerts where we end up having the public disregard them, that we have the car alarm syndrome. And I think that through the training that FEMA and others have led, there has been tremendous discipline, and that's led to really the success of wireless emergency alerts. I think as we look to future capabilities, and certainly the wireless industry is all behind next generation 911, we just need to be careful in asking the right questions so that we don't inundate. And our very strong fear would be that we see the public opt out of those imminent threat alerts that are saving lives today.
Thank you, Brian. That's a good segue. We have a question that we got from Ray Haling, who is the Chief of Public Safety Communications in 911 in Philadelphia. And Ray notes that they receive 3 million 911 calls a year. 77% come from wireless callers. They are, so this is a big deal. This is of great concern to them. And the question here is, how will expanded use of EAS, well, let me flip that over. How will the changing PSAP landscape, the introduction of text to 911, the introduction of IP-based platforms, text, video, over-the-top apps that are already slated to make their way to 911 callers, how does this new functionality, where they're going to get all of this new input, how do we factor that into giving them control over multiple outputs, of which EAS is a significant one? So I will leave that to Jay or Steve to, why don't you initially take the ball on that?
Thanks. Stevie next. All right. Steve just advised me I get to go first. Save the bullets for next. So I think that's an excellent question, and it's a concern we hear from PSAPs around the country. Next Gen 911 is going to inundate our call takers with multimedia. That's the fear. However, the good news is that there are also some provisions in place with NG 911 that include machine-to-machine type interactions. So triaging 300 data streams is not something one telecommunicator can do, but it is something that, in conjunction with the platforms, the transport through the ESINet, the platforms in the PSAP, the machine-to-machine type of capabilities, things like what we call an EIDD, an emergency incident data document, that very clearly defines certain elements of every incident and allow them to transport seamlessly between PSAPs. All of those things come into play when you start talking about NextGen and the multiple capabilities as part of that larger toolkit that helps the telecommunicators handle multitasking. And make no mistake about it, you will not find a better multitasker than a telecommunicator in a PSAP. So what we don't want to do is overwhelm them. And like I said earlier, we're not asking for more work. What we are asking for is more tools to allow us to do that work we know is coming more efficiently. And I think there are ways to do that. But we're going to have to integrate the technology with the training and with the people and with governance and with local operational considerations. Because at the end of the day, we have a saying, and Steve, I'm sure, has heard this: if you've seen one PSAP, you've seen one PSAP. There are 6,000 of them. Local operations are very important, and we have to be able to customize what we do based on those local needs. And I'll hand it off to Steve.
And to my Philadelphia colleague, whoever you may be, thank you for raising that very, in my mind, very timely question. I go back to a meeting that occurred in this room a number of months ago, and I forget the meeting, but I remember the remark, and it came from Admiral Simpson. And he said, as we talk about the next generation of 911, we need also to talk about the next generation of 911 call takers and what they are going to be tasked to do, both with the tools that they have, the responsibility they have, the multitasking responsibilities they're going to have. They're up to it. But we need to provide to them the training and the tools that they can accommodate that. With the influx of information that the next generation of 911 will provide, namely text, video, still photographs, etc., it's not quite sure yet, quite honestly, how that's all going to be managed. But I do have personal doubts that the call taker needs to see or needs to receive all of that information with that initial call. There has to be some means by which they know its availability so they can selectively use it or pass it off to the responders to access either when they get on the scene, perhaps while they're en route to the scene, and in some investigative cases, after the scene. So even though this information is going to be made available, and for which we should be thankful, at the same time, we need to be very careful how we execute the use of that information so that we don't overwhelm the call taker of today or the call taker of tomorrow. Yeah.
let me make one brief observation, and then we've got about 4 minutes. I want to combine the last two questions. I think, Jay, you made a really good point about the machine-to-machine, because if somebody's texting a photo of some horrible thing happening or a video, there's a lot of metadata that goes to location and time in that I think would remove unnecessary decision making, because you'd already know, oh, that's happening on the corner of 32nd and 3rd, or that's happening there and it's happening now. So that in the future, that kind of information could be presented as a given, and then reserve the space for that PSAP operator to use the instinct and the training that they have as emergency service professionals. But that leads to we've got two questions which I'm going to combine, and one is from Brian Fisher, and the other one is from somebody who came in on live stream, and it has to do with funding and training. And let me start with the live stream question, because I think, and I want to ask Wade to take the lead on this. To help emergency management to start using EAS and WIA, what do panelists think of putting EAS into National Incident Management System training? Okay, and then the second question, how we can do that, how we can fund it in some new stream that is not, emergency management performance grant or state homeland security grant. But let's talk about the NIMS, because it certainly occurred to us how close this is becoming to National Incident Management System issues.
Yeah, I'd say, and we've been hearing that for a while too. And so, and
we're in year 5 and working on the legislation.
And actually, but we're not waiting for the legislation. So
Cool.
We are in the cycle right now where the training courses for NIMS at the FEMA Emergency Management Institute are starting their go through. So they're looking through them, and there's a couple important things, and public, and I guess I'd start with there was a presidential policy directive that talks about national preparedness and created a national preparedness goal and study of how we were going to improve that. And one of the, I think the critical piece that we're leveraging too, as well as is going into NIMS and all of the training structure right now, is they identified what are core capabilities for across that incident management perspective, and actually across the preparedness perspective from training, outreach, preparedness of your citizens to response during an incident, and then recovery and mitigation. And one of those, there's only 3, I think, core capabilities. One of them is public information and warning. And that's our tie-in. That's something that's going new into there. And I wouldn't say that we are necessarily thinking, we haven't got too far in this, but we are talking with those folks, is not to say EAS necessarily, but we're encouraging that the tool sets, the integration of those tool sets, and then furthermore, planning. So getting together and in your exercises, so planning, looking at SOPs, like I said, encouraging all communities to sit down and look at how are they going to speak to the public, when they need to do it, how they need to do it, and what they need to tell them. And then putting that into exercises. So putting that, there's a lot of exercises that include communications with the first responders and with the neighboring jurisdictions officials. There's the public communication piece often is not in those exercises. So we're pushing that to be included in exercises that are done across all levels, so that you practice it. First you got to think about it, then you practice it, and then work into training, and then come back around to planning again.
I think, just to give some props to our friends in Alaska, that's exactly what their presentation was about,
right.
is how you turn the testing of the box into a public safety exercise. And
Right.
But then let's go to their question, which is, well, who pays? I mean, how can we come up, because the FCC is not a funding mechanism,
Right.
but what might other funding mechanisms be for states to go into the kind of training?
It doesn't
or
cost
equivalent
anything to
deployment?
take the NIMS training.
That's
Does it?
correct. Unless you travel there to actually attend in person.
But the IPAWS modules are online,
Right.
and anyone can access them.
And there's, I don't know the number of courses, a lot of courses online through NIMS that you can take.
All the PIO, Public Information Officer stuff, is all right out there. It's you go
Well, I
online.
think this is
you
like
sign
more
up.
specific to the use of some of these alerting mechanisms. How do you learn more about, what is an imminent threat?
It's
Okay.
all online. It's all available.
All right.
It's no charge.
And we need to continue to develop that online with what we're seeing get used in coordination with the new people that we're seeing become the alerting authority, not just at your.
It's not just your state emergency manager.
And it's not just your PIO all the time either. So I think that's rolling in. There are grants. There's a ton of different little grants that we've seen used creatively. Now that's a state managed process. So. There is public information warning. There's even some CAP and IPAWS language in the big grants language. It takes some creativity to get it to a local level to be able to pull that through your state. But there's funding available in grants that can be used the whole way from training to actual people to purchasing a tool to paying for your tool on an annual basis.
Okay. Thank you. And I think we're timing out perfectly. So I think that closes our first panel. Thank you all very much. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to have our second panel, which is going to be moderated by Susie Rosie Singleton of our Disability Rights Office and the Commission's Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Thank you all very much.
Hello, everyone. We are ready to begin again. Can everyone please take their seats? Hello, everyone, again, and welcome to our third session of the workshop. We will specifically focus on disability issues. As moderator, I will be asking the panelists various questions. And before we do that, I would like to give you a quick overview of the EAS report and order as it relates to disability access issues. We have on the panel Christian Vogler, who is director of the Technology Access Program and is associate professor, Department of Art, Communications, and Theater at Gallaudet University. To his left is Zainab El-Kebsi, who is policy counsel for the National Association of the Deaf. To her left is Charles McCobb, who is program manager for the Department of Homeland Security, IPAWS Program Office with FEMA. Then we have a fourth panelist who will be participating remotely from Minnesota. She is Lillian McDonald, Executive Director of the Twin Cities Public Television Station, Echo, Minnesota. And she is involved with their multilingual alerting project. Also, I'd like to, once we give a quick overview, then we will move to the panelists. There are many issues surrounding emergency alerting. And I will be focusing on the accessibility aspects. As you can imagine, accessibility to information has a crucial impact on 20 million Americans who have hearing loss and who are blind or hard of hearing. I'm sorry. The interpreter has gotten lost in her papers. Hold on one second. 28 million who are blind and 48 million who are hard of hearing. 48 million who are hard of hearing or deaf, as well as many others who have varying forms of disabilities. You may have heard Commissioner Clyburn's comments earlier today when she said the first nationwide EAS test recognized that there were a number of accessibility problems that needed to be resolved. The pass-through speed, the font size that was not easy for people to read, and the audio and video presentations were not synchronized. On June 3rd of 2015, the FCC released a sixth report and order to improve the operation of the Emergency Alert System, or EAS, to establish specific operational standards. In addition to requiring that EAS have visual messages displayed in a manner that is consistent with the FCC's current rule, and that is that it be displayed at the top of the television screen where it will not interfere with any other visual message. It also requires that the message be displayed in a color, a size, a location, a contrast, and speed that is readily readable and understandable. The visual and audio portions of the EAS message must be displayed in their entirety at least once during any EAS alert message. The EAS message may not contain any overlapping lines of EAS text, and it may not extend beyond the visual display field, except for crawls that intentionally scroll on and then off the screen. This order is not a mandate for speech-to-text for EAS. That text-to-speech technology is still maturing, so it is permitted rather than mandated by this order. The Commission did not adopt rules on audio and visual synchronicity when the messages are displayed with identical information in both audio and text, but the Commission will revisit this issue as it is needed. We are very fortunate today to have a distinguished panel of experts who will discuss accessibility requirements of emergency alerts and will share information about the availability and feasibility of any future possible solutions to address the new access requirements of the EAS order. Given their particular areas of expertise, we will explore what technologies are currently available and what technologies are contemplated for the future in order to ensure that the many-to-one and the one-to-many alerting and emergency communication architecture will be fully accessible. We may examine how IP-based open-source platforms can be used to facilitate accessibility for alerts and 911, and if there are any apps on the horizon that could facilitate geographically specific accessibility alerts and 911. We may review the efforts in the private sector to address accessibility for alerts, including audio-visual synchronicity, as well as the state of text-to-speech technology, including ongoing research and development efforts and TTS readiness for reliable and cost-effective implementation. With that introduction, I would like to move to the panelists, and I would ask that each of you introduce yourselves and then present the points that you would like related to these topics.
First of all, I'd like to thank the FCC for inviting me. I'm honored to be here. Good afternoon. My name is Christian Vogler. And as was mentioned, I'm the director of the Technology Access Program at Gallaudet University, also called TAP. I'm involved in a range of projects and will briefly explain three of the most relevant ones, not all of them. The three that are most relevant to today's talk. First, I am the director of the Rehabilitation Engineering Research Center on Technology for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, which primarily conducts research and development of technologies geared toward people who use hearing aids and cochlear implants. Second, TAP is a subcontractor involved in the development of accessible communication for everyone, also called ACE, ACE, or the ACE platform, which was originally suggested by TAP to the FCC to begin with. Third, TAP also has begun to dabble in the Internet of Things and visual alerting systems in the home. I'm going to briefly discuss what ACE is about. ACE is the next generation open source video relay service client software, and it's to foster interoperability among various VRS providers and mainstream telephony. It is also there to foster new deaf-staffed calling centers so that they can have direct access to customer support rather than going through a relay interpreter when talking with government agencies. Thirdly, it facilitates new communication research and development building on top of this platform. Thus far, emergency alert systems have been focusing on how to get the information out to people with disabilities and making sure that the media in which the information is presented is accessible. Although not perfect, there has been good progress, especially now that iPause has been deployed, and alternate formats for alerts are built right into the system. For example, we previously had TVs, now we've had WIA, Google Public Alerts, and a slew of apps built on top of these technologies. We also have NPR Labs projects for people who are deafblind and the radio alerting trial in some of the Gulf states. In terms of media, I see that the big gap is how to make alerting information accessible in ASL. People are going to have to think long and hard how alerts can be translated effectively and in a timely manner in ASL. So those have been focusing on emergency issues. And that has to do with making sure that media is fully accessible. But the problem is, even if the alerting media is accessible, they're useless to people if they don't know that an alert has been transmitted. For instance, take TV. My family has cut the cord and does not even own a large screen TV. We do everything on computers, tablets, and phones. And if you have a TV in the living room, if you're deaf and you're working in the kitchen preparing dinner, you would completely overlook the visual crawl coming along the television, even if it's the best visual crawl. Likewise, if you are charging your mobile phone and do not have it on your person, and an AWIA arrives, you will not be able to hear it if you are deaf, which means that you'll miss an alert. And I could go on and on. There are a number of things, a variety of things. For example, we're talking about setting up a subscription to an online alert service. You could also flash your internet-connected lights at your home, and if your home senses that you are present, you could get those alerts. Or you could even connect your hearing aids or an implant to an alerting service, and it would play an audible tone right into your device. You could also take advantage of ACE, which would allow for automated reverse 911 style phone calls, and you would get a visual alert from ACE to let you know that something is going on. The possibilities are endless. However, to make sure that this becomes a reality, we need to develop technical standards that complement the iPause technical standards. Those standards having to do specifically with the nature of the emergency alert so that your connected devices know what to do when something comes up. If not, it will just be the Wild West in our homes where nothing can communicate with anything else.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Zainab El-Kebsi. As Susie said, I'm a policy attorney at the National Association of the Deaf. I would like to thank the FCC for the invitation to be here today. It's a huge honor to be part of this panel and to be able to address the critical issues that we're talking about today. In addition to traditional methods of receiving alerts, radio and television, there's now an explosion of options for distributing emergency alerts. We have email, text, variety of apps. Through the use of iPause, we can receive emergency alerts, wireless emergency alerts, through TTY, through video phones, and through a myriad of other media to ensure that those messages reach everyone. We can no longer rely only on those traditional options of radio and television. Regarding EAS, especially with traditional radio and TV alerts, it's essential that the text that's displayed on television match exactly the audio that's being also broadcast. If there are specific instructions or specific messages via the audio, but the text simply says, for example, hurricane warning, that puts deaf and hard of hearing individuals at a serious disadvantage and in serious danger. An example happened to a friend of mine who lives in California. He's in the Riverside area, and he is deaf and was spending time with a hearing friend at his own condo. And they had the television on, and an emergency alert came up. It was a severe thunderstorm and tornado warning. So the hearing friend noticed that there was text on the television which was missing important information that did appear in the audio message. There were specific instructions telling people to either stay and shelter in their homes or to move to their basements in order to be in a safe space. So if that hearing friend had not been there, my deaf friend would have not had access to that information and would have missed those critical steps and would have been in a threatening situation in that situation. So it's really important that those two media really match. Deaf and hard of hearing individuals must have access to the same information that other members of the community have. In talking about wireless alerts, it's important to use them when appropriate. Oftentimes, deaf and hard of hearing people are out in the community and not at home. As Christian said, we don't always have access. We're not always in front of a television. We don't always have our devices on our person, so we can't rely on audio information or even traditional methods of displaying visual information. In another personal example, I have a friend who is deaf who was out in public. And oftentimes when you're out in public, you rely heavily on PA systems or on audible information in the environment where you are. So my friend happened to be in a shopping mall. And believe it or not, a small plane crashed into the structure while he was inside the mall. My friend was scared and confused and didn't know what was going on, could see that people were reacting but didn't know what was happening, and found out later that instructions were broadcast via the PA system and the public speakers within the mall. If my friend had been able to receive a wireless emergency alert via his phone, a text with information instructing him what to do and what exactly was happening, then he would have been able to follow those instructions and gotten himself to safety. Another accessible solution is to ensure that regardless of the method, whether it's EAS or wireless emergency alert, that the alerts themselves are provided in a variety of languages to make sure that we're being culturally sensitive. Deaf people are not always fluent in English. They may use other languages, so it's critical that any emergency alert information also be available in American Sign Language. There are serious gaps that we have identified in emergency alerting, and I'm pleased that we're here to start this discussion of how to provide more accessible information. Broadcasters and emergency managers need to work hand in hand with the deaf and hard of hearing community, with deaf and hard of hearing organizations to develop the appropriate protocols for their particular geographic locations to ensure that everyone has full access to the messages. Thank you.
My name is Charles McCobb, and I'm with the IPAWS. I'm a branch chief within the Interagency Coordination and Special Studies branch within IPAWS. And one of the areas that I focus on specifically is with accessible needs. I think it's important to understand where IPAWS sits in the context of emergency alerts and warnings. As a conduit, IPAWS is a system that basically is a message broker. Messages come to us, they're generated at the local level. They transit our system and they're broadcast to various entities in the commercial sector. So a large portion of the distribution of messages and warnings are levied on the commercial sector, our broadcasters, our radio, television, cellular providers. So we sit in a unique position, although we have a mandate to make sure alerts and warnings are more accessible, we sit in a unique situation where we don't generate the messages and we don't develop accessible technologies. But we work closely with the emergency managers that generate those messages, and we also work closely with the broadcast industry that distributes those messages to the public. And we see that disconnect between the needs of the population and what the capabilities of the system can provide. We have worked closely with FEMA's Office of Disability Integration and Coordination, with the FCC's Office of Disabilities, and we've set up a roundtable where we invite experts in technology, experts across the federal government and accessible needs to try to identify what those shortfalls are in the community and how technology can be brought to bear to answer some of those concerns. We've seen it in the broadcast community. We don't think it's a technical hurdle to cross, but it is identifying those issues and making them a reality across technology. With a large portion of the system controlled by the commercial sector, it's important that FCC, as the agency for establishing policy, ensure that we have the proper guidelines in the correct specificity to ensure that technological solutions can be developed to meet the accessible needs. We'll talk, I'm sure, later on the text size, scroll, a lot of the issues that came out of the national test can be addressed from a technology perspective, but we need those rules and legislation in place that defines the specificity of those solutions so that our broadcasters can develop on an even basis. Some of the things that we've seen is where we leave those decisions up to the local level or up to local broadcasters. But I think it's important that we drive that because there are many solutions out there across the enterprise. We need to make sure that we drive toward a set of solutions that meets the needs of the community. So it's not only a technical solution, but also bringing our accessible partners to the table to ensure that the solutions that we're implementing meet their needs. And I think it's extremely important that we work together in a partnership on a continual basis as we go toward the future. I think you'll see that, I'm sure, from Lillian McDonald in Echo, Minnesota, on some of the things they're doing with multilingual translations. So we see small pockets across the country, I shouldn't say small, but diverse pockets across the country who are making phenomenal efforts in providing accessible communications and means. But we need to do that on a national basis. And the only way we can do that is having a set of standards that drives that process for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Now we would like to move to Lillian, who is on the line, I believe, for her brief presentation.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting ECHO to be a part of this panel. Thanks to the Commission, my colleagues alongside the panel. I wish I could be there in person. This is an important topic for not only us here in Minnesota, but of course, obviously, across the country. And the work that we're doing here in multilingual warning and alert systems might actually be a solution to about 20 different states that are struggling with ways to communicate in different languages when there is a crisis or an emergency warranting public information, to make decisions about mass evacuation or shelter in place or other local or regional emergencies. I'd like to introduce our work. If we could move to the second slide. The mission of ECHO's work, and by the way, we are a program of Twin Cities Public Television here in the state of Minnesota with a core mission to collaborate with diverse communities to deliver programs and services that help people be healthy, contribute, and succeed. Our work 10 years ago was funded after 9/11 when health and safety agencies here in Minnesota recognized they needed to divert some grant funds to address a rapidly growing, diverse population here in the state of Minnesota. Right now, 10% of our state, their second language is English. Their native language is primarily Spanish, Hmong, and Somali, but we have as many as over 100 different languages represented here in the state, and that's expected to triple in size, or in volume, if you will, over the next 10 years. So health and safety officials got together and funded a program idea. I'm the founder of the program, but I work in partnership with many. On the next slide, you'll see our educational and emergency communication model, where we try to use a variety of existing channels, not reinventing the wheel, but rather utilizing the technology as it is maturing that already exists through a system of coordinated information release in different languages. On the next slide, our role in the community, we see it, is to partner with a lot of folks on the cultural side, but the public safety, public health side, other state agencies, of course our partner in Twin Cities Public Television, organizers of information through software and technology like digital alert systems, Homeland Security, Emergency Management, FEMA, FCC, and others. So our role is to bring together these populations and particularly engage these diverse communities into helping us provide the information that helps them. On the next slide, we received a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to actually test a process here through the IPAWS system, where we can actually boost the IPAWS compliant Common Alert Protocol, or CAP system, and the Emergency Alert System, the EAS system, by utilizing mobile alerts, text-to-speech technology, alongside the channels that already exist. We engage the Spanish, Hmong, and Somali-speaking communities here who have never before been served directly and invited to participate in the process. We see that as a key component in our process. We integrated mainstream existing technologies with the new alerting technology, and we essentially took 54 sentences that were already prescribed in English, converted those into the 3 additional languages through the digital alert technology, and created some best practices that we think can be replicated nationwide through our partnerships and then as processed through policies with IPAWS and others. On the next slide, we learned a few things as a part of this process. The English and the native language warnings will require engagement to understand the local nuances and cultural norms and differences that get folks to actually follow a warning and alert system, whether it's English only or other languages as well. The honor to be part of a process actually helps the public be more willing to participate and follow the process once it's determined. In the translation, no words are 100% foolproof, so it's important to recognize that and coach that publicly as we teach people about the warning and alerting process that we use. So outreach is important. It's a huge next step in our CPB project. And once people know what the words are, that doesn't necessarily mean they understand what to do. So even American-born English-speaking folks weren't sure in Boston what shelter-in-place meant until it was decided what that was and explained. On my last slide, our next work will be to share some media that we have shared to raise the awareness of our project and the process that we're trying to do as we support warning and alerts. We're working with emergency managers, broadcasters, and of course the cultural communities. We'd like to do this work regionally and also in partnership, as we have been, alongside FEMA and others, and work together with our local and national partners as well. Now, we've prepared just a little bit more than a 1-minute public service announcement that one of many. We've prepared these in several different languages, and what I'd like to do is ask that together we watch this that'll tell you a little bit more about our coordinated efforts here in Minnesota.
Cuando las sirenas se escuchan en el barrio, o se hace una prueba de emergencia en la radio o la televisión, o recibe un mensaje de texto en su teléfono celular, es difícil saber lo que significan estas advertencias, o qué hacer especialmente si es nuevo o está de visita en este país. Todas estas alertas son parte del Sistema Público Integrado de Alerta y Advertencia llamado IPAWS, y están diseñadas para avisarle de cualquier peligro que pueda afectar.
Now that public service announcement gives a high-level, quick look at the current system that we have using EAS and the new system that we would like to propose with the EAS so that smartphone technology and multilingual technology can help get warning and alerts out to 4 different language groups here in Minnesota. It's a start, and we believe that with continued coordinated efforts through technology, our partnerships here, that we may also be able to help those other states that are struggling to work with and inform diverse populations through mainstream emergency response communication systems. Happy to answer questions when the time permits.
Thank you so much. Now to the panel. I would like for you to share some reflections on these comments. I have a question. I think we've touched on a number of important topics, and we are continuing to look at technological evolution. And I think it's very important that we are mindful of including accessibility issues with our technology. For example, I got an iWatch recently, and I believe that the ramifications of accessibility for emergency alerting in the iWatch are incredible. So I'm wondering if that can be used to benefit the disability community. I think the internet and all those abilities are wonderful things. I would now like to ask the panelists to share. Zainab, you were talking specifically about the consumer perspective and the partnership with communities and the various issues involved with hearing alerts. Charles, I appreciate your talking about television stations and the member community that are involved. The FCC does have a number of rules, and the Disability Rights Office has implemented some rules related to 79.2 that will focus on television and their responsibilities for making sure that the information they present is accessible, and that any information is presented in accessible manners. Anything video and audio should be accessible to the various different groups with disabilities. So that means that both the audio stream and the video stream should be accessible. Then lastly, Lillian talked about how it is important to keep in mind the various populations, and that we must have effective outreach and collaboration to make sure that awareness is for everyone. And those are the takeaways I believe we can have from our panelists. I look forward to any further elaboration that you will provide. Now, in the audience, I know you are free to ask questions as well. If you do have questions, please send your questions to livequestions@fcc.gov or hashtag that hashtag for tweet, which is FCC Live. And also, you can have written questions on cards here in the audience. And you can see Celeste in front, who has the cards for any questions here. Now, for the panel, given your experience, what are your thoughts on the outstanding issues that are related to accessible emergency alerts, such as text-to-speech technology and audio and visual synchronicity?
I'll jump in if I may. This is Lillian. I would just like to, just to avoid a pun here, echo the concerns of Suzanne Goucher, who talks a little bit about it's one thing to have all the tools, but it's another thing to have a coordinated process so that we don't give the public too much information that eventually will fall on their desire not to pay attention anymore. So that is one concern that I have, that coordinated effort, and also at the local, state, and then across all the states of our country. So that's a big task, and making sure that the policies are in place and supported. Just in our process here, doing multilingual, so we do it for different languages here. It's not just about outreach and telling people about it, but it's also training of emergency managers to use this, and giving them the time to actually have the chance to train and use the system and test it for themselves so they can connect the dots from activation all the way to implementation and eventually the feedback that we want to hear from folks that have received the message. So I think those are two critical areas that I think need to be addressed next.
This is Charles from FEMA IPOS. I think it's also critical that we take a look at organizing and coordinating working groups that can study the technology and technical solutions that can be implemented. I think the things that we've witnessed from different states and localities across the country, there are some magnificent efforts that are underway to improve emergency alerts and warnings in different localities, but they're not coordinated as a national effort. And I think a part of that is, while sitting here in D.C., I think we need to bring together those applicable leaders in technology from the commercial sector and from the disabilities community together to discuss the needs and solutions that can be put forth and eventually, hopefully, put forth in some type of guidance for a standard way ahead for the implementation of accessible messaging. There are some significant infrastructure and technology hurdles associated with integrating the text-to-speech and synchronicity of both the audio and the video for EAS. So there can be several different ways for solving that solution. But I think bringing the partners together and discussing that to come up with applicable solutions that can be accepted by the industry and implemented effectively on a wide basis is a first place to start.
And this is Christian speaking. I agree with what Charles just said. We need standards for technology and processes that are set in place. Those are very important with respect to accessibility. That's the reason why, when we think about it, there are a number of different disabilities, and it's hard to find one technical solution or technological solution that would meet everybody's needs. It's simply impossible. We need to be flexible. We need to be innovative and come up with different solutions. And what's exciting about it is that it is possible, but one of the biggest barriers that I see is that we might have wonderful new technology, but people aren't thinking about how that technology can become accessible. That issue is just set aside. It's not even considered. So we're having to force people to walk backwards, step backwards, and add that accessibility to their technology, which can be expensive. And oftentimes I'll see that there are laws or rules that are not catching up with the technology. They're way behind. One thing I think about is CVAA, the 21st Century Communication Act and Video Accessibility Act, in which I was a part of it. But there was part of it that was talking about advanced communication services, and there were parts of the law that were trying to look forward to, and it was very broad in its language, talking about any new communication technology has to be accessible. And I think in concept it would be great. I would love to see something similar to happen for the emergency alert system. And currently we don't have that in place. We have very specific rules, very specific language for television, for radio, et cetera. And that's it. We don't really have any language that talks about new technology that may be coming up. And I would love to see language that would be able to be broadly applicable to new technology.
We have very innovative technology, but we haven't looked at the needs of the communities. It's important that we include these considerations from the beginning and not go back and retrofit. We need to think about the accessibility needs as we begin. As I said in my opening remarks, it's a partnership. We need to start with the broadcasters, the emergency staff, the hard of hearing and deaf community, and have everyone working together as a partnership arrangement. And we just need to provide accessibility, period. Emergency information is critical. People are at risk. Death might be the result of the lack of information. So it's very, very important to have that information in both a visual and audio version. That issue is not, it shouldn't be a problem. That needs to be information that's included from the beginning.
I'd also like to just say a couple things on the good news side. It's easy for us to point the finger and say it should be this way and not that way. But some of the technology, changing diverse populations, accessibility issues for disability populations, and just some of the challenges of coordination with limited funding, we've got a lot on our plate. And I think acknowledging that and looking for the efficient ways that we can, it's going to be hard for us to customize a system that is often one size fits all. And that's what we're trying to do. And the technology offers us that opportunity now, coordinating that all the way down from the federal to the very local, rural emergency manager before that alarm is sounded is a giant undertaking that I dare say is going to need some additional legislative support too before we're going to see some real strong action.
Thank you. I'm hearing some buzzwords out there: coordination, collaboration, technologically neutral, buy-in, bacon. That was an interpreter error. Sorry, bacon, but also buy-in. Interpreter wasn't 100% wrong. I think that's important as well. But I think these are all very critical concepts when we're moving forward. And I did see a hand out there. Did you have a question? Somebody from the audience has a question? You'd like to ask a question?
Yes, hi. My name is David Nelson, and I work for Amtrak. I really kind of have a two-pronged question. So Amtrak asked me to come up with a solution. This is something that I'm struggling with. So when I have an employee with a disability who works for Amtrak, I would need some type of alert system or notification or whichever you'd like to call it. However, the problem is our police department is located, their home base is based out of Philadelphia. And so I wouldn't want a message to be sent to every single Amtrak office around the United States. It needs to be localized. Is there a way to make that specific? And if so, how would that work? And then also if there's a passenger with a disability on the train, and an important message needs to be triggered, letting them know that something has happened in their little local area, is there a way to do that, to localize and centralize that information for our APD, Amtrak Police Department, to send a message directly to a small group of people? We have many train stations throughout the United States, and so that's one of the issues that we face.
Thank you. Thank you, David, for sharing that. And I'll go ahead and turn that over to Charles, who I think might be able to answer that question.
Well, actually, I was looking at Dr. Volger. I had an opportunity to go to Gallaudet University, and I think you were employing a system called Alert C, or emergency, with the emphasis on being able to see. A technology that allowed you to make a call to a central police office and then get a visual of what is happening at that particular incident through the camera on the individual's phone. I know that was a very unique capability as part of a separate system or technology, but could be leveraged for a closed type environment. But from a alerts and warnings perspective, as far as IPAWS is concerned, it would require alerting authority in a specific area that you had the alert to go out to. So if your central office is in one state and you're actually operating in different locations, it would be individual alerting authorities at those separate locations to be granted authority to send that particular message. Also, a feature of IPAWS would allow you to do information sharing, or what we call COG to COG information exchange, where you could share an emergency situation amongst multiple entities in your collaborative operating group without actually transmitting. So they could share, if an event happened in one location, they could share that information with multiple locations without actually broadcasting to a wider public or audience.
In fact, Charles.
Thank you. Oh, I just wanted to add to what Charles was saying.
I was just going to add quickly that ECHO is going to be testing the cog-to-cog along with a public information message next month in collaboration with FEMA, FCC, City of Rochester, and many other partners as well for that purpose.
And this is Christian. I wanted to add some thoughts to what Charles just said. Gallaudet University does have our own emergency communication system. We have a system called Alert Us, which flashes information throughout the university, throughout the campus. So as you can imagine, it's set up very similarly to what it would look like on a train system. My concern would be if you were to add yet another closed system, because that's expensive. It requires a great deal of investment. So I'm wondering if it would be possible for Amtrak to latch on to the open public system, IPAWS, because IPAWS already has the capability of directing and targeting warnings, which means that they wouldn't have to require the user to download some sort of specific software on their phone or their tablet, whatever it is that they're using. To me, maybe I'm naive in this, but I think the important question is, how can we integrate the Amtrak authorities with the IPAWS system, the IPAWS alert system? Is that possible? I mean, I don't know if it's a political issue. That's just a question I'd like to put out there.
No, I think that the challenge for Amtrak, I think, as Amtrak traverses across the country, so you're crossing multiple jurisdictions. So one of the key, I think, opportunities for Amtrak would be to partner with those local emergency managers in that area to ensure that you have either access or are granted authority to be able to alert in a specific area of concern. So that's developing a close relationship with the local alerting authorities, with the local emergency response elements, which would prove advantageous to not only the local OEMs, but also to Amtrak and your passengers. If there is a potential train derailment, or as we've seen recently in Europe, where we actually have had hostile shooters on a train, that's something that you would want to get out to the public and out to your passengers as soon as possible. And that's something that can be shared on IPAWS backbone and cog-to-cog across multiple locations, as well as providing that information to the local community and the response entities that would be interested in supporting.
This is Susie speaking. Thank you. Admiral Simpson would like to add a word to that.
Thank you very much for the question. The Amtrak example is an excellent one. And while I do believe that there's great value in Amtrak and other train administration capabilities, having direct relationships with the community centers, emergency centers, all along their routes, I also believe that we should not constrain our target for what ought to be in the future to Amtrak just being constrained to doing alerting through those community centers. There's no reason why Amtrak couldn't be looked at more like the National Weather Service, where when the Doppler radars indicate that there's the touchdown of a tornado, they, in their operation centers, draw a polygon around the area for which they believe that tornado is going to traverse, and that communication or the translation of that polygon to the wireless towers and the applicable broadcast entities in that polygon happens without having to have the second communication to each of the community centers. I think for a threat that would be along the route of Amtrak or another train systems, we ought to be setting our sights on use of the tool optimized for the kinds of threats and response actions that train operators would potentially see and want to communicate rapidly to their passengers and first responders in a way that didn't allow jurisdictional seams to have that response trip up.
Thank you so much. We have 2 more questions that we would like to pose, but we only have 5 minutes before we close. Thank you, Admiral. I would like to ask for a response to a second question. For the communication systems that we hope to deploy, what are the accessibility issues that you foresee that will need attention and resolution? And what are the technical opportunities and barriers? I don't know who would like to share an answer to that first. I know all of you are probably anxious to share.
This is Christian speaking. Wow, that's a difficult question. It's a very broad question. So far we've talked a lot about how we can receive the emergency alerts. So we've got the one-to-many. But when we're talking about the opposite, the many-to-one, if I'm deaf, I see something that's happening, an issue that's taking place, how do I communicate with the emergency services to let them know? And that's been a struggle. That's been an issue. We're hoping with Next Generation 911 and also with ACE that there will be an improvement with direct communication with 911 and other emergency managers. I think the technology is becoming ready for that. What's missing is training the individuals to communicate with the deaf and hard of hearing community, which is an important gap. And also the funding and the political willingness and motivation to go ahead and establish these PSAPs. PSAPs do not have enough money. And I am aware of some PSAPs who have direct communication with deaf and hard of hearing through video, but a lot of them are resistant to it because they're concerned about their own personal safety. If someone calls 911 and they're able to see who the operator is in the PSAP, there are some issues that with being able to identify that PSAP operator that are coming up, and those are difficult to address.
Thank you so much. Anything else that anyone would like to add?
This is Zainab. I think Next Generation 911 is really the future that will allow the deaf and hard of hearing community to be able to contact 911 staff. So that's really the answer right there.
On the multilingual side, I can tell you that here in Minnesota, social media has played a role in two-way communication. When we send out social media about a need to get an H1N1 vaccination a couple of years ago, might be 3 years ago now, we actually heard back through social media chains from Somali community about their resistance at that time and questioning about the value of getting a medication that they weren't sure would actually help them in a preventive fashion. So we actually clarified through the Somali community with social media. We use that mechanism as a way to alter our message to meet public information needs in cultural communities who are trying to figure out mainstream systems.
And this is Charles with IPAWS. And I think central to our alerting capability, I think you have to use multiple channels. You have to focus on multiple means of communications, leveraging social media, leveraging the traditional TV, radio, broadcast, internet. So you look at multiple message penetration throughout the environment. We also need to take a look at the use of symbology, incorporating within messaging. As we all know, a picture paints 1,000 words. And leveraging symbology helps to cross that language barrier, cross that cultural barrier. and developing standards in identification of different emergency events. And we also need to continue to push the use of ASL. I think that's one of the areas that there is a tremendous capability. There's a tremendous enhancement that is not fully embraced and or used all of the time, and I think we really need to push that as an additional means.
And it's also important that we consider all those considerations and the different mechanisms, that one-to-many that we have now, and that all of these are part of our future looking. The final question that I would like to pose is to ECHO in Minnesota. The question is, how are the multilinguistic access points that you have, including the deaf community, in each of those language groups? And I would like to ask that you add ASL as one of your languages, and to consider those who are deaf and blind as well.
Thank you for the question. I can answer that in two ways.
I'm sorry, this is the interpreter making a correction before you begin the answer. Those who are deaf and those who are blind, not those who are deaf and blind. And then I guess we could add deaf and blind to that list as well.
I understand. Thank you. We have worked with the ASL community here in Minnesota. They are, while we don't classify them as a cultural community, they are a community that we're well aware of. The second part to my answer has to do with when we do put out information in different languages and video formats, they are spoken in native languages, but they are captioned, open captioned in the English language, which means they are bilingual media outputs. So that gives folks the opportunity to hear the information in their own language, whether it's Spanish, Hmong, Somali, or whatever, and they can read it in English. That suggestion actually came from our diverse communities themselves to expedite their ability to integrate into learning English. So that's the reason why our information is produced in a bilingual format. And we believe that some deaf and hard of hearing populations can utilize information from the open caption English captions. It's not an ASL paraphrased statement, but it is English captions.
This is Christian. I think it's very interesting, and I'd like to just add a point to that. Open captioning is wonderful, and I applaud you for adding the open captioning. But I would like to point out that open captioning does have some accessibility issues with it as well. For example, as I'm getting older, my vision is declining, and so open captioning can be challenging to read. I'm fine now, but I'm thinking somebody who's at the age of 80 or 90 may have a challenge with that. In general, theoretically speaking, closed captioning is more accessible, but it would be nice to change the font size, the font color, to make it more easily read. But also when we think about the deaf-blind community, they really can't access that information. So I would ask you to consider how you can also utilize the closed captioning and then some other accessibility. So not just closed captioning, but other accessibility as well.
Thank you so much. Our time has run out. I hope we can have further discussion after this meeting, but thank you so much for your input.
Thank you, Susie. And now give closing comments and remarks is Deputy Bureau Chief of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, Lisa Folks.
Thank you, Greg. And I'd like to thank all of you for participating in today's workshop. Today we continued our conversation to promote the wider use of the EAS, but also alerting technologies in general, as well as ways in which we promote not just the accessibility of EAS, but again, accessibility of emergency alerting technologies in general. I think you'll agree that one thing we learned today is that to reach our goal, the rules that govern alerts and public safety officials' use of these systems must continue to evolve as legacy networks transition to next generation technologies. But I think another thing that we've learned here today is that the FCC can't do this by itself. Now, look alive, because it's going to be rare that you hear someone from the FCC or any federal agency tell you that. But there are plenty of issues that the FCC might be able to do by itself. This is not one of them. To address these issues that we've talked about today is going to take the entire emergency alerting community. And that isn't just the industry. That is PSAPs, emergency managers and other public safety entities. That includes consumer groups, organizations, people that represent the disability community, organizations and people that represent those who do not speak English. And a lot of times, and I think we've heard this suggested from various people, sometimes we in the government, in the industry, can sit up on high and come up with things, and then we find out they really don't address the needs of the communities that we're trying to serve. So there needs to be discussion, coordination, collaboration from all these stakeholders if we want to get this right. Do you all agree? Yes. I can't hear you. Yes. Okay, so let's get to it. I want to thank the staff and the team of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau and the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau who organized this event. I want to also acknowledge my associate bureau chief who helps me oversee the Bureau's emergency alerting efforts, Nikki McGinnis. I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and for those of you who are traveling, I wish you a safe journey home. Thank you. Take care.